Hi, I'm Olivia, a cheerful 10-year-old girl with pigtails and a gap in my smile. That was me, living what I thought was the perfect life. Our house always smelled like freshly baked cookies, and my parents, Thomas and Rebecca, seemed like they had everything under control. Olivia, honey, come help me set the table, Mom would call sweetly, like the apple pie cooling on the counter. Dad would come in, briefcase in hand, giving Mom a kiss on the cheek. How are my favorite girls? He'd ask, messing up my hair. But then things started to change. The sweet cookie smell was replaced by tension. I'd see Mom glaring at Dad while drinking her coffee, and Dad would sigh and go into his study. One night, I snuck downstairs after hearing them arguing. You're never home, Thomas. Do you even care about this family anymore? Mom yelled. That's funny, coming from you, Rebecca. Maybe if you weren't so wrapped up in your own world, Dad shot back. I covered my ears, trying not to hear, but their fights got louder and harder to ignore. Then came the day everything fell apart. They sat me down on the couch, looking serious. Sweetie, we need to talk, Mom began, her voice shaky. Your mother and I have decided to get a divorce, Dad finished, not looking me in the eye. My world spun. But, what about me? I asked, my voice trembling. The silence was painful. They exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. We think it's best if we find you a new home, Mom said, her words cutting like knives. A new home? You mean you don't want me? I couldn't believe it. It's not that we don't want you, Dad tried to explain. We just can't give you the stability you need right now. But I knew they were choosing themselves over me. In that moment, my heart broke into a million pieces. The next few weeks were a blur. Social workers, paperwork, packing my room. I clutched my stuffed bear, Mr. Snuggles, as I was led to a car that would take me to my first foster home. You'll be okay, sweetie, the social worker said, patting my shoulder. But I wasn't okay. How could I be? My parents, the people who were supposed to love me the most, had decided I didn't matter. As the car drove away from the only home I'd ever known, I felt a hole open inside me, a void I didn't think could ever be filled. I stared out the window as my neighborhood disappeared, tears running down my face. I was alone now, truly alone, and I had no idea what the future held. I just knew things would never be the same again. The first few weeks in foster care felt like a nightmare. I kept hoping I'd wake up back in my old room, but every morning I realized it was real. The Johnsons, my foster family, were nice enough, but I couldn't shake the fear that they would get rid of me, just like my parents did. Olivia, sweetie, breakfast is ready, Mrs. Johnson called one morning. I slowly walked downstairs, avoiding eye contact. Thanks, I mumbled, picking at my pancakes. Mr. Johnson tried to be friendly. So, Olivia, any plans for today? He asked. I shrugged, not wanting to talk. Why get close to them when they'd probably send me away too? There were other foster kids in the house, but I kept my distance. Jake, a loud 12-year-old, tried to get me to play tag with him, but I stayed away. Come on, new girl, are you scared or something? Jake taunted, but I just glared at him and walked away. I didn't need friends. I didn't need anyone. Still, the Johnsons didn't give up on me. Day after day, they kept trying. Mrs. Johnson would leave little notes in my lunchbox, and Mr. Johnson offered to teach me how to ride a bike. Slowly, even though I didn't want to, I started to warm up to them. One night after dinner, they sat me down for a talk. Olivia, Mrs. Johnson said softly, we've been thinking, how would you feel about us adopting you? I froze. Adopt me? Part of me wanted to jump with excitement, but another part of me was scared. Could I really trust them? You want to keep me? I asked quietly. Mr. Johnson smiled and nodded. We'd love for you to be a permanent part of our family. Tears suddenly flowed down my face, and I didn't even know if they were happy or sad tears. The Johnsons hugged me tightly, and for the first time in months, I felt safe. The adoption process began, and it was a roller coaster of emotions. Some days I was excited, thinking about decorating my new room, but other days, I was terrified. What if they changed their minds? What if they realized I wasn't worth it? I shared my worries with my social worker during one of her visits. She squeezed my hand and reassured me. The Johnsons adore you, Olivia. They're not going anywhere. Just when I thought everything was finally getting better, my world turned upside down again. I was doing homework when the doorbell rang. Curious, I peeked around the corner, and my heart nearly stopped. There, standing at the door, were Thomas and Rebecca, my biological parents. We've made a terrible mistake, my mother said, tears in her eyes. We want our daughter back. My father nodded, looking serious. We've worked through our problems. We can be a family again. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The Johnsons were shocked too, and I could see the fear in their eyes, the fear of losing me. My mind was spinning. Part of me, the little girl who still longed for her parents' love, wanted to run into their arms, but another part, the one that remembered the pain of being abandoned, wanted to slam the door shut in their faces. I stood there, frozen, as the adults argued. The Johnsons were firm about continuing the adoption, while my biological parents begged for another chance. "Olivia, sweetie," my mother called out when she saw me, "don't you want to come home?" Everyone turned to look at me. I felt torn in two, caught between the parents who had given me up and the ones who chose me. I was shaking as I realized that the decision was mine to make, and it wouldn't be easy. The courtroom felt huge and intimidating. I sat there, feeling small in my new dress as the grown-ups debated where I should live. The judge, looking serious, peered over his glasses and said, "We're here to determine what's best for Olivia." I watched as my biological parents, Thomas and Rebecca, acted like the perfect couple. They smiled and held hands. "We've worked through our problems," Thomas said. "We're ready to be a family again." But something didn't feel right. I noticed Rebecca glaring at Thomas when she thought no one was watching. Then, the truth came out. The Johnsons' lawyer started asking questions, and suddenly, everything spilled out. "Mr. Thomas, is it true you had an affair with your secretary?" the lawyer asked. Thomas turned pale. "That's not relevant," he muttered. "And Mrs. Rebecca, can you explain these receipts for alcohol and prescription pills?" Rebecca stammered, "That's private." My head was spinning. An affair? Drugs? Was this why they gave me up? But it got worse. The lawyer pulled out some papers. "Can you explain this email discussing using Olivia to access her trust fund?" I felt sick. They didn't want me back, because they loved me, they wanted money. Through all of this, the Johnsons sat quietly, holding my hand. They didn't shout or accuse anyone, they just supported me. When it was my turn to speak, I was shaking. "Olivia," the judge said gently, "who do you want to live with?" I looked at Thomas and Rebecca, the parents who had abandoned me and now wanted to use me. Then I looked at the Johnsons, who had welcomed me into their home and hearts. "I want to stay with the Johnsons," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "They're my real family now." Thomas jumped up, shouting, "You can't do this, she's our daughter." "Mr. Thomas, sit down," the judge warned. Rebecca tried another approach. "Sweetie, we're your real parents. We love you." But I had heard enough. Real parents don't abandon their kids. Real parents don't try to use them for money. "You're not my parents anymore," I said. The courtroom went silent. I saw the hurt in Thomas and Rebecca's eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to care. They had hurt me much worse. After what felt like forever, the judge finally made his decision. Custody is awarded to the Johnsons, and the adoption will proceed as planned. Relief washed over me. It was over. I was free. As we left the courtroom, Thomas tried one last time. "Olivia, please," he begged. I turned away. "Goodbye," I said, and I meant it. I was cutting them out of my life for good. The car ride home was quiet. Mrs. Johnson kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. "No," I admitted, "but I think I will be." That night, in my room, my permanent room, I cried. I cried for the little girl who had been abandoned, for the family I had lost, and for all the pain I had gone through. But as I cried, I felt something else too, hope. I had a chance to heal, a chance for a new beginning. Mr. Johnson knocked softly on my door. "Olivia, we made hot chocolate. Want to watch a movie?" I wiped my eyes and smiled. "Yeah," I said, "I'd like that." As I joined them on the couch, snuggled between my new parents, I realized something. Family isn't about blood, it's about love, and I had finally found mine. Second story. 15 years later, a lot had changed. Here I am, Dr. Olivia Johnson, 25 years old, sitting in my own office. The walls are covered with children's drawings, little reminders of the lives I've touched. Dr. Olivia, can we play with the sand tray today? My young client, Mia, asks. I smile, remembering my own therapy sessions. Of course, Mia, let's see what stories we can tell. As I watch Mia arrange the figurines, I think back to my own journey, the nightmare that haunted me for years, the trust issues I had to overcome, but with the Johnsons' love and a lot of therapy, I made it through. After the session, I head out for lunch. That's when I see him, Thomas, my biological father, sitting on a bench. He looks disheveled. "Olivia?" he calls out, his voice raspy. "Is that you?" I freeze, my heart pounding. He stands up, stumbling a little. "Please, I just want to talk, to apologize." I take a deep breath. "There's nothing to talk about, Thomas. I've changed," he pleads. "I've hit rock bottom. I understand now how wrong I was." For a moment, I feel a twinge of pity, but then I remember the pain, the betrayal. "I'm glad you've realized your mistakes," I say firmly, "but that doesn't change what happened. I've moved on with my life, and I suggest you do the same." I walk away, my hands shaking but my resolve strong. As I turn the corner, my phone buzzes with a news alert. Rebecca, my biological mother, had been arrested for fraud and drug possession. She was facing 5 to 10 years in prison. I sink onto a nearby bench, feeling overwhelmed. Part of me feels vindicated, but mostly I just feel sad for the little girl who once thought they hung the moon. That evening, I come home to a surprise party. The Johnsons, now mom and dad, have gathered friends and family to celebrate the launch of my book. To Olivia, Dad says, raising his glass, "Who turned her pain into purpose?" I look around at the faces of my chosen family. There's Jake, my once annoying foster brother, now one of my biggest supporters. My best friend from college is here, as well as my mentor from grad school. "I wouldn't have made it this far without all of you," I say, my voice catching with emotion. Later, I find a quiet moment with Mom and Dad. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," Mom says, hugging me tightly. "You've come such a long way," Dad adds, "and you're helping so many kids." I think about the book on the coffee table, Rising from the Ashes, a guide to healing from parental abandonment, my story out there for the world to see, but more than that, it's a beacon of hope for others. I just want other kids to know they're not alone. I tell them that their worth isn't determined by the people who let them down. As the party starts to wind down, I step outside onto the porch for some fresh air. I think about Thomas and Rebecca, and about the scared little girl I used to be, but I'm not that girl anymore. I'm strong, I'm loved, I'm whole. Just then, my phone pings with a message. It's from a reader of my book. "Your story gave me hope. Thank you for showing me there's life after abandonment." I smile, tears filling my eyes. This is why I do what I do, why I've turned my pain into purpose. As I look up at the stars, I make a silent promise to that little girl I once was, and to all the other children who feel lost and unwanted. You are worthy of love. You're not defined by those who left you. You can rise from the ashes, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way. With that thought, I rejoin my family, my real family, knowing that while I can't change my past, I can use it to create a better future for myself and others, and that's the best way to move forward. If you were in my shoes, would you have given Thomas a chance to explain himself when you saw him years later? Or do you think cutting ties completely was the right decision?
Where are you? Come back home now. The house is a mess. Excuse me? Who's this? I don't recognize your voice, and I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm Sylvia. I've been a housewife for 3 years since marrying Zach. I like cooking, and I even have a chef's license. I occasionally hold cooking classes using this license, and the classes have become quite popular. Zach is friendly to those around him, but his attitude at home is cold. Zach and I met through a mutual friend and got married after dating for 2 years. Both our families and friends congratulated us, and we were able to have a very memorable wedding. However, since getting married, Zach has become more distant with me, and he would make horrible remarks, leaving me distressed. "What do you want for dinner tonight?" "Anything's fine." After breakfast, Zach gave a curt reply and headed to the entrance with his bag. "I see. Oh, are you going to work now? Have a good day." Even when I saw him off at the entrance, he would leave without turning back. Did I do something wrong? I would always think about this while cleaning up after breakfast, but time would pass by without an answer. I would finish most of the housework in the morning and start preparing for the cooking class in the afternoon. Holding a cooking class using my qualifications is one of my hobbies, and all the students are lovely people. Today's menu is homemade cheesecake, and I'm planning to make several variations like pistachio and chocolate. Ah, I forgot to buy it. I still have time to go shopping if I leave now. I quickly got ready and headed out for some last-minute shopping. At the grocery store, I ran into one of my students.
Ah, Sylvia, hello.
Are you here for today's shopping? This woman, Tess, is a young woman who recently joined my cooking class. But perhaps because of her friendly nature, she's adored by the other students like a younger sister. Hello. Yes, I forgot to buy something and rushed here. Is that so? Let me help you. Would it be all right if I come over to your place with you after this? Thank you. Yes, let's go back home together.
Awesome.
Tess and I finished our shopping and went back home. Afterward, she helped me with the preparations, and we waited for the other students to arrive. In the meantime, we chatted about trivial things and I even gave her advice on her love life. My boyfriend is older than me, and we've been dating for over a year, but he's never taken me to his place. I was feeling insecure, but there was no point in doubting him, so I decided to wait for him to invite me. I realized worrying is a waste of time. I understand. I've had my own worries about Zach, but thinking about it doesn't lead to any conclusions, and I'd rather not dwell on it.
Right? It feels more beneficial to do something enjoyable in the meantime.
Indeed. Thank you. I've been a bit troubled lately, but talking to you has cheered me up. Sighing, I said this, and Tess looked worried for a moment, but then smiled and cheered me up. Meanwhile, the students arrived one by one, and once everyone was there, we started the cooking class. I'm home. That evening, while I was preparing dinner, I noticed Zach had come back and went to the entrance to greet him.
Welcome home.
Dinner's ready. Okay. He muttered and went to the bathroom loosening his tie. Not this again. I sighed, but remembering my conversation with Tess, I cheered myself up, telling myself that everything was okay. If you're going to shower, I'll bring you a change of clothes. Please put your laundry in the basket.
I know that without you telling me. Leave me alone.
All right, sorry. Are we stuck in a rut? His response that he gave me without even looking me in the eye still made me feel lonely. During the meal, we were silent, and he was always looking at the TV or his phone.
How's work been going? Is everything good?
Yes.
I made cheesecake in today's cooking class. Want some after dinner?
No.
By the way, I was thinking of looking at some furniture this weekend. Want to come with me? I have work.
Lately, our mealtime conversations have been like this, lacking any spark. Seeing as we were sitting at the same table, I wish we could have even trivial conversations. The lack of conversation makes it harder to understand Zach's thoughts, adding to my anxiety.
About the next cooking class.
As I began to say, Zach slammed his fork down.
Hey, you're so noisy that I can't hear the TV. Are you trying to annoy me on purpose?
His clearly irritable remark made me a bit nervous.
Who do you think allows you to run a cooking class when you're only good for housework? I'm tired from work and just want some peace at home, so can't you keep quiet?
I was shocked by the words he said as he was glaring at me, but I chose to stay silent to avoid provoking him any further. It was even more hurtful to me that he was glaring at me the first moment our eyes met today.
Good. Don't talk to me.
After that, we had our meal in silence. I couldn't enjoy the dishes that I had taken time to prepare, and time seemed to drag on. A month later, Zach had stopped speaking altogether. He even stopped saying good morning. And he ignored me when I spoke to him. At this point, I desperately wanted to know the reason, but was too scared to ask.
Good morning. Breakfast is ready.
I kept talking to Zach even though I knew I'd be ignored. Maybe he was stressed from something at work. Perhaps he was just lashing out at me because of that stress. I desperately wanted to think positively, hoping maybe this was his way of showing his dependency on me. Otherwise, I felt like my heart would break. I had cooking class today, but I burnt some food. So I had to remake it. Oh, by the way, our neighbor had her baby safely. I was thinking of getting her a gift soon. Any ideas what would be good? Should we get some new dress shirts soon? One of them got ruined the other day. Zach's silence had now lasted over 2 months. I was forgetting what his voice sounded like. My heart had already broken. I was starting to wonder if we could even continue as a married couple. But making decisions was difficult without knowing the cause of Zach's current state, leaving me with nothing but loneliness and anxiety about our future. Then, I fell ill and had to go to the hospital. I thought it was just a cold, but the test results came back and they were bad. I was told I needed further examination. They say illness starts with the mind, but could this be it? You'll need to stay here a few days for more tests, so please get your things ready and come back again.
All right.
I received the test results and pondered how to tell Zach. I hoped the detailed examination would turn out fine, but if they find something. My stress only grew on top of an already anxious daily life. Welcome back. There's something I need to tell you. I greeted Zach when he came home from work as usual and tried to start a conversation with him, but he still ignored me. But I continued anyway.
I've been feeling unwell and went to the hospital. It turns out I need to go through more detailed tests. I'll have to be hospitalized for a few days. So, you'll need to manage meals and laundry on your own.
Zach's expression did not change even when I talked about my health, and it was clear that he had not stopped what he was doing or showed any signs of being upset.
So, you're ignoring this too? Well, anyway, good luck with that.
I realized that he truly didn't care about me. I had hoped that talking about my health might make him a bit worried, but I was naive. But there was no time to feel sad. Surprisingly, there was a lot to do. Unlike Zach, my students were all worried about me, and their words were so comforting that I couldn't help but shed some tears. Afterward, I went in for my scheduled hospital tests, which unfortunately came back with bad results. I was told surgery was necessary and was given a consent form. Please have your husband sign this. The doctor's words felt like a stab in the heart. I was sure he wouldn't even listen, let alone sign this paper. When I asked what to do if Zach couldn't sign it, the doctor said, "Oh, is your husband away on a business trip? Then your parents can sign it instead." Hearing that, I decided to ask my parents to sign it if Zach refused. When I returned home after a few days, no housework had been done, the laundry and dishes were piled up. Even the trash from ready-made meals hadn't been taken out. I had suspected as much. Then, as usual, Zach returned home silently and sat down at the table set with dinner. I was nervous. Welcome back. I was discharged from the hospital today. It must have been tough while I was away, right? I'm sorry. So, I need to have surgery, and your signature is required on the consent form. Could you sign it, please? After we finish eating and I clear the table, I'll leave it here for you. As expected, he kept ignoring me. Feeling frustrated that there was not the slightest sign of concern when he heard about his own wife needing surgery, I decided to take the plunge and ask him why he was behaving like this.
Why are you ignoring me? Did I do something wrong? It's been about 3 months, hasn't it? Please, just tell me why.
Perhaps my emotional outburst was too much, because Zach stood up from his meal halfway through and left the room. Why? I collapsed, crying alone. I didn't know what to do anymore. Can we even say that we are a married couple in a situation like this? I couldn't bear such painful circumstances any longer. Maybe I needed to change myself. I tried to reboot my mind, fill it with positive thoughts, and went to sleep. Since the consent form for the surgery needed to be signed, I headed to my parents' house the next day. Zach hadn't signed the consent form I had left on the table. I wasn't expecting much anyway, so I got ready and left the house without any more sadness. Upon reaching my parents' place, they welcomed me with smiles on their faces. Seeing their smiles made me burst into tears, and they hurried to comfort me, patting my back.
What happened?
They asked out of concern, so I decided to tell them about my situation. After hearing my story, my parents were outraged. My father said with a stern expression,
"Get a divorce and come back home right now."
But without knowing the reason, I was unsure how to proceed. My parents then suggested,
"Why not hire a detective agency?"
Even if I had no reason to suspect an affair, knowing how he spends his time outside might provide a clue as to why Zach was ignoring me. I accepted my parents' suggestion and decided to have a private detective investigate Zach's activities. The agency agreed to conduct the investigation during my surgery and hospitalization, and they would inform me of the results once my condition stabilized. They were very cooperative and ready to start immediately. Consulting with my parents and the detective agency made me feel a bit relieved from the anxiety I was bearing. My parents, who signed the consent form, also accompanied me to the hospital on the day of my surgery and waited outside the operating room the entire time. Thanks to them, I was able to undergo the surgery with peace of mind. The surgery was successful, and I had no problems with my recovery. When my condition stabilized, I contacted the detective agency, and they told me they were ready to report the results. I decided to hear the report in the hospital with my parents present.
"We found that your husband is having an affair."
Hearing those words made my heart race. I started to tremble slightly. My mother said,
"You don't have to force yourself to hear this."
But I insisted I wanted to know the details.
"You have your condition to worry about, so if you would like us to stop at any point, please let us know. For now, we'll continue. The woman is a staff member at the cafe on the first floor of your husband's company building. They met there and seemed to have lunch together almost every day. They would often meet after work and then head to a hotel. We were able to obtain evidence quickly. Their relationship has been rumored within your husband's workplace for over a year now." "Over a year? We've only been married for 3 years. So he started having an affair less than 2 years into our marriage?" "It seems so." "When did you first notice a change in your husband's attitude?"
Upon being asked by the detective, I realized that indeed, Zach became colder a year after our marriage. I never thought it could be an affair, but now, looking back, the timing makes sense.
"Everything was normal until a year into our marriage, but then he started acting cold towards me. So he had been seeing someone since then. I feel so foolish for not realizing it."
I tried to laugh it off, not wanting to worry my parents further, but I couldn't hold back my tears. My parents who were beside me looked very sad.
"We understand how you feel. With this much evidence, you can file for divorce and claim alimony. It's not my place to say, but you don't need to put up with this anymore. Ultimately, it's up to you.
Hearing the detective's words, I looked at the photos again. I saw Zach smiling in them. It was a smile I hadn't seen at home for so long, one I used to adore. But it was directed at another woman, not me, yet, upon closer inspection, I recognized the face.
Wait. Tess?
I hadn't noticed her when I first saw the photo because I was focused on Zach, but the woman with him was indeed Tess.
You've got to be kidding. Wait, you know this woman?
Yes. She's a student in my cooking class. I had no idea Tess was Zach's mistress.
So, you knew her. It breaks my heart to deliver such cruel news. But, it seems this woman didn't know your husband was married. She didn't know she was the mistress.
Hearing this, I remembered Tess's confidences to me. Come to think of it, Tess had confided in me that her boyfriend never took her to his place.
Well, that makes sense. He couldn't take her home because he's married. We did some digging on her, and she has a good reputation. We didn't realize she was acquainted with you, as your cooking class was closed during our investigation. What are you going to do? I found it hard to believe Tess would engage in an affair and felt the need to talk to her. If she was aware of this and was having this relationship regardless, I wanted to hold her accountable. Whether Tess knew or not, I had already decided what to do about Zach. I'm going to divorce Zach. I want to do it right now. And I want to talk to Tess. I'll decide how to deal with her after our conversation.
My parents agreed with my decision, urging me to come back home right away. The detective also offered a supportive smile, saying they would help however they could. I felt I had allies. This solidified my resolve. After being discharged, I waited until Zach was at work to pack my things. The house was in a terrible mess after my long absence. But that no longer mattered to me. I packed the essentials, left the filled-out divorce papers on the table, and left the house. I got into my parents' car, which was waiting outside, and went back to their home. 2 weeks later, Zach called. Seeing his name on my phone, my heart raced, and my hands shook, but my decision to divorce was unwavering, so I answered.
Hello? Where are you? Come back home now. The house is a mess.
Zach's voice, which I hadn't heard in a while, was rough. Excuse me? Who's this? I don't recognize your voice, and I don't know what you're talking about. Zach seemed even more infuriated by my response.
Don't mess with me. Leaving divorce papers like that.
I'm busy right now, so please don't bother me.
Are you making a fool of me? Come back and clean up this place.
I don't know who this is, so I'll be hanging up now. I immediately ended the call. I used to want to talk with him and hear his voice, but now even the sound of his voice was repulsive. After hanging up on Zach, I exhaled deeply, relieved. At that moment, my mom knocked on the door and, with a smile, suggested we have some tea. While having tea with my parents, the landline rang, and it was Zach again.
Oh, Zach, it's been a while.
What's the matter? That's what mothers are for. She was calm as ever. My father was beside her looking furious.
Vanessa, it's been a while. Is Sylvia there by any chance?
Yes, she's here.
I thought so. Actually, Sylvia left divorce papers and left. I'd like to talk with her, but it's not working out. Could you ask her to come back home?
Yes, I know about the divorce papers. Could you sign them and submit them? What? What are you talking about? I don't want a divorce. And Sylvia is the one at fault here. She left without getting any housework done. Don't you think she's a failure as a housewife? Not at all. But if you think so, That's a good enough reason to sign the divorce papers, isn't it?
Well, if she would just come back and take care of the house, I'd give her another chance.
You're rotten to the core.
Excuse me? Vanessa?
From what you're saying, it sounds like you just need someone to do the household chores, right? Then why don't you hire a housekeeper? What were you thinking? Not signing the consent form for surgery, not being there for the procedure, and not visiting her at all during her stay. A husband who doesn't support his wife during hard times is not even a husband, he's a disgusting human being.
It's because I was busy with work.
No, it's because you found it bothersome, right? And now, because there's no one to do the chores, your house has turned into a garbage dump, and that's why you're looking for Sylvia? Sylvia isn't a maid. Enough is enough. Hey, you! How dare you call us?
Anton.
Letting my daughter marry you was the biggest mistake of my life. What do you think my daughter is? Just submit the divorce papers already. And never come near my daughter again. Got it?
My father seemed unable to contain his anger any longer, and my mother had to forcibly take the phone away from him as he yelled. Then he slammed down the receiver with such force that it looked like it might break.
Anton! You're going to break the phone!
Oh, sorry. I got carried away. Watching my parents' interaction, I couldn't help but laugh. After that, Zach called many times. Just seeing his name on the phone display made me sick. Hello?
It's me. When are you coming back?
He must have forgotten the conversation with my parents. Zach was contacting me like nothing had happened.
Excuse me, who is this? Stop playing around. I'm trying to reach out to you here. Didn't you want to talk to me? The Zach whom I know seems to have lost his ability to speak, so I don't recognize your voice. Besides, I have no interest in talking to such a person anyway. Playing hard to get, huh? I'll talk if you come back now. Hurry up and take care of this place.
These words made me understand it again. That Zach was indeed looking down on me. I was seen as a mere housekeeper, not his wife.
No need to talk, then you. Enough already. How much more trouble do you want to cause? Keep up this lazy attitude, and I'll really divorce you. You depend on me too much to get by without me.
I'm glad to hear you're willing to agree to the divorce. I realized I couldn't harbor any affection for Zach anymore. I just wanted the divorce to be finalized as soon as possible.
What? Have you finally lost your mind? You can't live without me.
I wondered why I ever married such a person. I couldn't even remember what I used to like about him.
You were better when you were silent. If all you can do is say such things, maybe it's best if your mouth gets sewn shut. Goodbye.
I wished he would just be indifferent and sign the divorce papers already. It seemed like this troublesome situation would continue a bit longer. And today, I was supposed to talk to Tess. This matter was also important. I got ready and headed to the meeting place with Tess.
Sylvia!
Seeing me, Tess waved with a smile. It didn't seem like she knew about the situation.
Sorry to keep you waiting. It's been a while. Yes, it's been a while. I'm so happy to see you. How have you been? Are you okay?
Tess, whom I hadn't seen since the last cooking class, was concerned about my health.
Thank you. Things have settled down now. Though I still need to go for regular checkups. That's good to hear. But don't let your guard down, okay?
So, you mentioned you wanted to talk today.
What's up?
We entered a cafe and ordered drinks. And then I got to the main topic. So, Tess, you talked to me about your boyfriend before, right? His name isn't Zach, is it? When I asked, Tess looked surprised.
Yes. You know Zach? That's a surprise.
Tess's eyes widened.
Know him? He's my husband.
When I said that, Tess froze. An uncomfortable silence followed, and I could see Tess's hand trembling slightly as she held her drink.
What? Husband? Zach is? What? Sylvia's?
Tess seemed confused. From her reaction, it was clear she had no idea. So you really didn't know? I only recently found out that Zach was having an affair too. Tess's face turned increasingly pale hearing the word affair.
Affair? I was having an affair. But it might just be someone with the same name, not the same person.
I placed a photo in front of Tess. Tess hesitantly took it, and upon seeing the photo, she started crying. I was deceived. This is the worst. Sylvia. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't feel anger towards Tess, who burst into tears. Instead, my anger towards Zach was about to explode.
It's okay, Tess. You didn't know anything, and I don't blame you. I didn't want to hurt you, but I thought we needed to clear things up. I'm sorry.
I apologized while comforting Tess, who was sobbing. I knew it would hurt her. But if she had known the truth and acted indifferently, I would have wanted to blame her. I'm thinking of getting a divorce. What about you? I'll break up with him too. This cleared up my suspicions. Sylvia, I'm sorry even though I had no idea. You must have been hurt so badly. I'm really sorry. Seeing Tess crying as she apologized, I started to shed tears too. After a while, Tess calmed down, and we decided to talk about the future. I'm planning to file for divorce and claim alimony from Zach. Don't worry, I won't ask for any compensation from you. Sylvia. Thank you. Even though I'm in a position where I should be taking responsibility too. I'll break up with Zach too. Actually, I'm furious right now. Sylvia, I know it's weird for me to say this, but I'll provide plenty of evidence of the affair. Let's teach him a lesson. Seeing Tess's willingness to help me, despite being hurt herself, made me a bit envious of her. I put down my drink and reached out my hand to Tess.
Thank you. Let's do this. Yes.
Tess grasped my hand, and we exchanged a firm handshake. The next day, I decided to visit a lawyer's office just in case. If Zach didn't agree to the divorce, it might go to mediation. I wanted to be prepared for that possibility. After consulting with the lawyer with the evidence provided by the detective agency and Tess, the lawyer suggested that the evidence was sufficient and recommended sending a demand letter to proceed with the divorce. I agreed to proceed in that direction. 3 days later, Zach called as usual. I had been ignoring his calls, but this time it felt like the right moment to answer. Hello?
Finally, you answered my call. You've been ignoring me this whole time. I told you I don't want a divorce, so you have no choice but to come back. The house is a mess. We're getting complaints from the neighbors. It's all your fault. Come back now.
It seemed like he hadn't received the demand letter yet. Well, I guess it wouldn't be delivered so quickly anyway. I thought as I replied. I told you I want a divorce.
Stop saying things that are convenient for you after ignoring me for so long. Besides, there are other things you're hiding from me.
Hearing this, Zach began to falter.
What? What do you mean by things I'm hiding? I haven't done anything wrong.
Zach?
It's been a while.
While Zach was trying to say something, I passed the phone to Tess. At that moment, I was having tea with Tess, so I decided to let her take the call.
What? Tess? Is that you?
Zach's confusion was evident even over the phone.
Yep. Tess here. I was just having tea with your wife. What? My wife? What are you talking about, Tess? How pathetic. I know everything now. You've been deceiving me. And Sylvia told me about how you ignored her and about her illness. You really are the worst. It makes me sick to think that I ever dated a guy like you. Never show up in front of me again. Don't even contact me. Go to hell, you idiot.
Tess's expression and tone were unlike anything I'd seen or heard from her before. I thought to myself calmly about how scary Tess could be when she gets angry.
What's with you, Tess? You're different. Come on, be upbeat and positive like you always are. Shut up. Bye.
Then, Tess returned to her usual smiling, cute self and handed back the phone.
Here you go, Sylvia.
She had such a refreshed look on her face. Even I felt a bit better listening to her.
That's how it is. You understand, right? My lawyer should be in touch with you soon.
Hearing this, Zach's voice trembled, unable to hide his panic.
Your lawyer? No, you got it all wrong, Sylvia. Tess was just, well, a fling. You know, men often cheat. It was just something I tried out. Obviously, Sylvia, you're the most important one. And look, I wasn't ignoring you. Oh yeah, I've been having trouble with my hearing, so sometimes I couldn't catch what you were saying, so I might not have heard about the hospital thing or whatever. Tess and I are over now. You're the only one for me, Sylvia.
The more I listened, the more repulsed I felt by his words. And his shallow excuses almost made me press the button to end the call.
You know what? Being worthy as a man is about having the guts to see things through until the end, and being dependable. This means you, who lack all these qualities, are not even worthy enough to cheat on me. Well, I think anyone who cheats on their partner is a good-for-nothing guy anyway. Oh, don't contact me directly anymore. You'll have to go through my lawyer from now on. I mean, you're really disgusting. I don't want anything to do with you. Goodbye. Wait. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I won't ignore you anymore, and I'll stop cheating on you.
He continued saying something, but I had conveyed what needed to be said, so I hung up. I didn't want anything else from him. I looked at Tess, and she was smiling.
That was refreshing, wasn't it? Sylvia. Indeed. We're friends, aren't we?
Tess seemed on the verge of tears after hearing that. Oh, Sylvia. I'm sorry about all this. I really love you, Sylvia. Even though that man brings me painful memories, I'm grateful I could become friends with you through all this. Tess, who embraced me while saying this, is still adorable to me, like a little sister. I went back home and told my parents what had happened. They seemed relieved. I apologized for making them worried about me, and they told me it's normal for family to worry about each other. After the demand letter was delivered, Zach had no choice but to reluctantly agree to the divorce. With overwhelming evidence, he couldn't make excuses and had to agree to pay the alimony. When the lawyer visited his house, it was reportedly in a terrible state, filled with garbage and a bad smell. So, the conversation was held outside. Apparently, there was a neighbor who overheard this, and since she was notorious for being a gossiper, word soon spread in the neighborhood. Zach returned to his parents' house when it became too difficult for him to stay there. Zach's parents contacted me later to apologize, and I learned that Zach had quit his job and spent his days cooped up in his parents' house. As for me, after the divorce was finalized, I reopened my cooking class and am enjoying my life. Tess quit her job at the cafe and decided to open her own shop. It had been a dream of hers for a long time. She even asked me to work with her, and I'm actively considering it. Looking back, I have no idea why I put up with such a life before. Part of me was afraid to make the choice to divorce, but I sometimes think that if I had known how stress-free and happy I would be when I finally did, I would have divorced sooner. Spending time with my parents now brings lots of laughter and joy every day. When I told my mill I was going back to my hometown to give birth. By all means, go back. I don't want to see your face. I was delighted from the bottom of my heart as I was waiting for those words.
You won't have to see me anymore, rest assured. What?
I am Emily, about to turn 28. My mother died from illness when I was only 2. Since my father, a busy man, ran a clothing company with a 100-year-old tradition, I was looked after by my grandmother as he worked. My father was very strict, and I lived my life just as he told me to. Perhaps because of that, I had never dated a man, but I had given up, thinking it was destiny. After graduating from college, I worked briefly as my father's secretary at his company, but he said it was hard for him to work together and forced me to quit. I didn't get a job after that, because my father strongly stated that I don't need to work. However, my friends from university got jobs and started dating and getting married one after another, so I wanted to work too. I told my father one night, "Dad, can I work?"
No.
He said one word without asking for a reason.
Why not? Because you don't need to work. But I also need to go out into society and gain more experience. Emily, don't talk back. I'm not talking back. I'm not saying anything wrong. You should just stay home, Emily. If you say that, I'll leave home. I'll leave home and go to work from there. Emily, stop it. No. I'm an adult. I won't always do as you say.
I cried and left the place. Even in my room, I cried for a long time. After a while, I called my friend from college, Lisa. "Can I come to your house now?"
Sure, but what's wrong? And can you go out at this time?
"I can't right now, but I'll figure it out. Can I stay at your place for a while?" Lisa's apartment was a luxury condominium gifted by her parents, boasting 3 rooms.
Seems like something's up. That's fine, just be careful on your way here.
Quietly, I pulled out my suitcase, packed my belongings, and stealthily left the house so as not to alert my father. I left a note on my desk stating that I was going to stay with a friend. Once outside, I hailed a taxi and headed towards Lisa's apartment. Upon arriving at Lisa's apartment, I was greeted with my favorite coffee that she had prepared.
Thank you, Lisa. What's going on, Emily?
I explained everything about the argument with my father and my subsequent departure from home.
That's awful, Emily. You've had no freedom at all.
Her words brought tears to my eyes once again.
Until now, I did everything my father said and thinking it was normal. But suddenly, I've started craving my own freedom.
That's completely normal. It's strange that your father doesn't allow you to work.
I'd like to meet many people and have a good time too.
So does your dad know you're here? I left a note saying I was going to a friend's place, but he doesn't know any of my friends. He might be frantically searching for you right now. Maybe.
It's late now. Shall we go to bed? Yeah, I am really tired.
Lisa prepared a separate room for me to sleep in. The next day, Lisa left for work. When I checked my phone, I saw about 10 missed calls from my dad. I felt sorry for him and sent him an email to assure him not to worry. In the evening, after Lisa finished work, she called me. I'm going out for a drink, why don't you join us? Having little experience with social drinking, I was excited about going out. When I arrived at the location Lisa mentioned, I found her waiting with 2 men. Sorry for keeping you waiting. So, who are these gentlemen? Pointing to the shorter man, Lisa said.
This is my boyfriend. And the tall guy over there, he's single and ready to mingle.
The tall man introduced himself with a refreshing smile. Nice to meet you. I'm Max, pleased to make your acquaintance. Oh, nice to meet you, I'm Emily. That's how our relationship started. Max worked at a small company in the apparel industry. For a moment, I thought it was a company similar to my father's, but I quickly dismissed the thought. Max's family was the opposite of mine, with only his mother around, but he didn't discuss the reason and I didn't ask. One day, Max said to me, I'd like to meet your father, Emily. I had been emailing my father several times since I left home, but I had no intention of going back home yet, so I didn't want to meet him.
I'll think about it. But I would like to meet your mom, Max. Sure, when? Even today is fine, if you want. Really, today is fine? Then I should buy some kind of gift. Yeah, my mom loves that kind of thing.
As I found out later, my MIL didn't just love that kind of thing. She got very cranky if I didn't bring those kind of things for her. On the way to Max's house, I bought a cake at a bakery. Upon arrival at Max's house, my MIL was waiting for us at the front door. When I asked Max why his mother was there, he told me he had sent her a message from the bakery. My MIL stared at me and asked, And your name is? I'm Emily. Nice to meet you. What do you do for a living?
I'm currently unemployed, but I plan to work soon.
Oh, so you're just idling about. How nice it must be to be a rich young lady.
I'm not rich. That's why I want to work. You don't need to talk back. What do your parents do? My mother passed away when I was young. My father works at a company.
Max, who had been watching my conversation with his mother from the side, said,
How long are you two going to talk here? Let's go inside.
Right.
By the way, Max, did she bring anything? Surely she didn't come empty-handed?
In a rush, I handed my MIL the paper bag containing the cake.
This isn't much, but...
Grabbing the bag almost violently from my hand, she peered inside and commented,
I didn't really need anything, but I guess I'll take it.
In the few minutes I had spent talking to my MIL, I had grown to despise her. And I felt sorry for anyone who had to call such a person MIL. Entering the living room, my MIL bombarded me with questions and I gave her only bland answers. Regardless, she continued to interrogate me relentlessly, almost as if I were a criminal suspect. Exhausted by the barrage of one-sided questions, I told Max the moment her line of questioning eased.
Max, I think I should go soon.
At that, my MIL's face turned red with anger.
Do you really hate being with me that much? You've been giving half-hearted replies to my questions this whole time. Mom, please, calm down. Max, why on earth did you bring such a rude woman here? There must be better women out there.
I snapped back at her.
What about me is rude, exactly? If there's something I should improve, then tell me so I can work on it.
That seemed to incense my MIL even further.
You're quite cheeky, aren't you? All you have to do is answer my questions.
I've been answering everything you've asked.
You dislike me, don't you? I can see it in your face.
I wanted to say yes, but I couldn't. I'm just tired and would like to go home.
Well, aren't you audacious? I wonder what kind of education your parents gave you. They mustn't have been good parents. I would love to see what they look like.
Hearing her badmouth my parents, I was overwhelmed with sadness and began to cry.
Oh dear, now you're crying for sympathy. If you want to go home so badly, then go. It will be a breath of fresh air. Also, I'm going to feed this cake you brought to my dog, Charlie. But Charlie is quite a pampered pooch, so he might not eat such a cheap cake.
Laughing, my MIL pointed at the cake I had bought.
Mom, enough is enough. Max, you really have no eye for women.
Max frowned at his mother's comment and retorted.
Why are you always so argumentative? Can't you act more mature for once?
Max shot back, causing his mother to lose her energy instantly.
All I want is a good wife for you, Max. I get that, but I'm an adult too, you know. I'm not a kid anymore, so I can handle my own stuff.
Hearing Max's words, his mother's eyes filled with tears, and she left the room. With a teary face, I decided to leave too, but Max followed me and apologized.
Emily, I'm sorry for all the harsh words my mom said. She must be just jealous thinking that she's losing me to you. I'll talk to her about this, okay? Please don't let this discourage you from coming again. I'm really hurt by what your mother said about my parents, Max. I don't want to see your mother again.
The moment I said that, a wave of sadness overwhelmed me, and I burst into tears, throwing myself into Max's arms. Max held me close and after a while, suggested,
How about we go somewhere now?
Barely nodding, I left the house with Max. Since Max didn't have a car, we took the train and got off at a station by the beach. We sat on a bench on the sandy beach, staring at the sea for a long time. 2 months passed since then. I found out that I was pregnant. When I consulted Max about it, he proposed. Let's get married. We don't have to have a ceremony, but we'll make it official. We can live in my house, okay? I don't make much at my job, so I can't afford to rent an apartment. I'll make sure to talk to my mom about not saying unnecessary things to you, Emily. Living with his mother wasn't ideal for me, but there was no other place to live.
Okay, I'll try my best to get along with your mother.
Thus, I ended up living with my MIL. Because I was getting married, I went back home to tell my father about it. He looked delighted when he saw me.
It's good to see you looking well. I know we've been in touch, but it's been a while since I last saw you.
I'm sorry, Dad. I have something important to tell you.
My father's expression changed immediately. I told him about my encounter with Max, my pregnancy, and our plan to get married. My father listened silently. When I finished, he simply said,
Well, congratulations. Can't wait to meet my grandchild.
His smile looked forced.
Dad, thank you. I'm sorry for bringing such sorrow as a daughter,
I said as tears flowed down my face. My dad was also crying. I expected him to be angry, but his gentle words hurt me even more. I ended up moving into my MIL's house. Lisa, who had been taking care of me ever since I left my home, said to me,
You better show me your cute baby's face soon.
Yeah, of course. And you should get married soon, too. I want to get married soon too, but he just won't make up his mind. But I think it'll work out somehow. Let's go out for dinner together again. I planned to move on Sunday, but my MIL said it was a bad luck day, so I changed it to Saturday. The move was completed safely on Saturday morning. While the movers were carrying my belongings, my MIL just stood there, watching them. She was repeatedly told by the movers to step back because it was dangerous, but she wouldn't move. When the move was over, my MIL called me over and said,
"You didn't give them what they're supposed to get, right?"
I didn't understand.
Huh?
It seemed she misunderstood me pretending not to know, and she went away and handed something to the leader of the movers. Seeing that, I understood what she was saying but when she came back to me, she said,
"Dear, it seemed like you didn't want to part with your money, so I gave it for you. Of course, you'll pay me back later."
She then told me an absurd amount of money. It was way beyond what was generally considered reasonable, so I said,
"You gave them that much? Oh dear, was that bad?"
"It's not bad, but I think the amount was a little too much."
It's the thought that counts in these situations. If you skimp, you'll be cursed. I'm not saying I'm skimping.
I didn't say anything more because I knew it would lead to another argument. My MIL had this face saying, "I'm right no matter what you say." That's when Max showed up and said to my MIL,
"Mom, what's up? What did you say to Emily?"
"Just nothing." My MIL replied succinctly, then walked off. "You okay?" "I told her not to mess with you, you know." "Thanks." Deciding not to mention to Max that I almost had another argument with my MIL. I knew if I did, he might mention it to her, causing her to grow even more hostile towards me. After moving in, my MIL barely spoke to me, obviously avoiding me. There were even weeks where she wouldn't utter a word to me, and those days were bliss. One day, Max brought home some work documents in an envelope. It was marked with a company name, Star Textiles Inc., and that made me gasp. That was a name I had heard many times during my time working for my dad's company. They were one of our subcontractors. I asked Max,
"Is this your company's envelope?" "Yeah, why?"
"I was just wondering. I just realized that I didn't know much about your company." I didn't tell him that his company was a subcontractor to my father's. For some reason, I felt it was better not to say anything.
"Well, we're just a small subcontractor. If our parent company decided to drop us, we'd go bankrupt instantly and all the employees would lose their jobs."
Max laughed with his wistful look. About a month later, Max started coming home late from work. He also seemed down, so I asked him, "You've been coming home late recently. Is something wrong? You don't seem yourself." He admitted and said,
"The company's in trouble." "What, like going bankrupt?"
Max nodded. "The parent company suddenly decided to cut our orders by half. Now, our boss is begging them every day to continue business as usual. We're also looking for new clients, but if neither of those things work out, we're going bankrupt." As I listened to Max's story, I thought about asking my dad to help Max's company. But my father is strict about his work, so he would never help a business partner out of personal feelings. For some reason, the number of business partners must have been halved. I told him that my father's company is the parent company of Max's. Max was surprised at first, but then told me with a twinkle in his eyes, "Emily, please, beg your father not to reduce his business with us." "I'm sorry, Max. My father is strict in business. He would never make such a decision based on personal matters. Could you at least try, Emily? It won't help, As I said this, Max got down on his knees before me.
Please, I beg you.
Stop it, Max, don't do this. I'll talk to my father, but I know it won't make a difference. As Max raised his head, tears of relief streamed down his face. That night, I called my father and explained Max's desperate plea. So, the company Max works for is Star Textiles. I guess I have to help them then. I was surprised. I had expected my father, with his strict business mindset, to refuse outright. But I have two conditions. First, I will continue to do business with Star Textiles as before, but I want Max to leave that company and work for mine. Second, you and Max will move in with me. Is that acceptable?
So, you're saying Max should transfer to your company? I'll talk to him about that. But why do you want us to live with you?
My father answered, sounding a bit uncomfortable.
I just want my daughter close by.
Okay. But why did you decide to reduce your dealings with Star Textiles in the first place? A new company approached us with a very attractive proposal, so we decided to do business with them. But after some research, we found that they have a history of breaking promises, so we were planning to call off the deal.
So, even if I hadn't asked, Star Textiles would have been fine?
Maybe. My father laughed, and I couldn't help but laugh too. After hanging up, I immediately relayed the conditions my father had proposed to Max. He was relieved that Star Textiles was no longer in jeopardy, but he seemed hesitant about moving to my father's company. It's hard for me to consider working for your father's company, Emily. I've always worked hard at Star Textiles, and I have a lot of good colleagues. I'll tell my father what you said. I called my father again, and when I relayed what Max had said, my father responded. He indeed said that, huh? He's a responsible, good man. Got it. He can keep doing his best at Star Textiles. But I'm not backing down about you guys moving into my house.
Understood.
After the phone call, Max was overjoyed when I told him what my dad had said. I told Max,
Just remember, don't let your mother know about my father's company. If she finds out, she'll start nagging again.
Right, got it.
Several weeks later, I decided to go back home for the birth of our child. Even though it's just my father and elderly grandmother at home, it's way better than being taken care of by my MIL. I waited until my MIL was having her afternoon tea in the living room, and I approached her. MIL, about my childbirth, I've decided to go back home. It's just my dad and my grandmother, but my grandma is still very active and full of energy. When I said this, my MIL looked at me with hateful eyes and said, By all means, go back. I don't want to see your face. I didn't feel anything when my MIL said this, as I had anticipated it.
You won't have to see me anymore, so rest easy. What? I mean, I won't be coming back here anymore. And soon, Max will be moving to my parents' house as well. What are you talking about? Max is too busy with work to move. It's okay now.
At that moment, Max came in and said to his mother,
Mom, my company is going to be okay now. Emily helped me. What are you talking about? Emily's dad is the owner of my company's parent company. What?
Hearing this, my MIL raised her voice and stared at me for a while before saying,
Emily, I had no idea you were the daughter of the owner of the parent company of Max's. I've been very rude to you up until now.
My MIL bowed deeply.
It's okay now. May I ask you for a favor? I'd like to live together at your parents' house as well.
Mom, no. You can stay here.
Yeah, I don't want to live with you, MIL.
I'd be reminded of all the things you've said to me up until now.
I won't say anything else. Please, I beg you.
My MIL said with tears in her eyes. I know it seems cold, but that's not possible. Then, my MIL got on her knees, bowed her head to the floor, and pleaded.
Please, I don't want to live without Max. Please. No, I can't.
Mom, stop it. If you had been kind to Emily before, we could have lived together. But your past behavior has led to this. Give it up. I told my MIL, who continued to shed tears on the floor.
Well, MIL, you brought this on yourself.
Half a year later, Max, our newborn daughter Kay, and I visited my MIL's house. However, the house was void of any human presence, and the air was chillingly cold. Max was calling out loudly to his mother, but there was no response.
Max, did you mention we were coming over? No, I thought it'd be a surprise. I wonder where she is.
Just then, my MIL, who had become severely emaciated, came out of the bathroom. Even upon seeing us, she did not change her expression. The kitchen was piled high with remnants of instant noodles, and dirty dishes were left stacked.
Mom, are you okay?
My MIL glanced at Max, but said nothing.
MIL, we brought your favorite cake.
As I held out the cake, my MIL rushed towards me, snatched the cake, and began devouring it immediately. I repeated what I had said before.
Well, MIL, you brought this on yourself. This person hasn't regained consciousness even once since being brought to the hospital.
Yes, that's right. It seems her body became weaker after a fracture before.
Then it's about time, isn't it? I'll prepare the funeral wreath.
As I was speechless at my SAL Nancy's words, Nancy, without showing any concern for me, looked down at Mom lying in the bed and said,
So, I can finally say goodbye.
And laughed mockingly before walking away. I was dumbfounded, unable to understand, and too stunned to even feel angry. I sat down, placed my hand on my forehead, and sighed. This was too harsh to be a joke. Not funny at all. Is it even right to say such things about one's own parent? I don't have children, so I don't know, but I think I would be sad if my daughter spoke to me that way. As I thought this, my MIL Barbara, who had been unconscious, slowly began to rise.
Oh my!
Barbara! I woke up because I heard Nancy's voice. That's right, there was something I wanted to tell before I die. Barbara spoke to me with a clarity unexpected from someone who had been unconscious. And I will never forget the smile on her face. Just 3 days later, Barbara passed away in the hospital where she was admitted. It was around the time when the buds on the cherry tree visible from the hospital room window were just beginning to bloom. My name is Linda. I am 58 years old this year, and my husband David, who is the same age, and I have lived a peaceful life without any major fights or troubles since our marriage. The only regret in our lives was not having children, but after we both turned 50, we stopped worrying about it from the bottom of our hearts and started looking forward to how we would spend our retirement together. David had been running a chain of eateries for a long time, but was transferred to the headquarters for his skills, and now he is in charge of several stores, leading a busy life. As a housewife, I tried my best to support my busy husband by always being frugal and ensuring he could truly rest when he came home by keeping the room clean and always arranging flowers by the living room window every weekend. I don't know if David is interested in flowers, but arranging seasonal flowers in a vase became my only hobby, hoping it would bring him some comfort. That's an unusual flower, isn't it? Lily of the valley? David pointed at the flower on the table and said to me. Without touching his breakfast bread and with a cup of black coffee in one hand and the newspaper in the other, he shifted his gaze to the flower. It's a snowdrop. In a small vase made for single flowers, a delicate white flower blooms downward at the tip of its slender stem, presenting a cool demeanor. The white flower, mistaken by David for a lily of the valley, is a cute flower that tells us of the arrival of spring in our garden. They bloomed in the garden's flower bed again this year. I decorated with a few because they're so cute. They might wither quickly since they don't take up water well.
I see. They're beautiful.
David folded the newspaper on the table and quietly murmured as he looked at the flower again. How has Barbara been lately?
What do you mean?
Are you in touch? Aren't you going to visit during the holidays this year? Even though we didn't have children, we still visited each other's parents a few times a year. However, recently, David has been busy with the opening preparations of new eateries he's in charge of, making it difficult to take a long break. David folded the newspaper, looked up at the clock on the wall, and stood up. That was my cue to hand him his lunch. Take care. Will you be home early today?
Not sure. Oh, no. I'll be home early today,
David said while looking at the calendar on the wall. Today was their wedding anniversary. After David left the house, I started preparing to make the special meal I had planned for today. The sunlight streaming through the curtains grew stronger, signaling it was noon. I was heating up last night's dinner in the microwave when the phone rang. The landline, which rarely rings. It was mostly unused, but calls from relatives or Barbara usually came through it. So, when the landline rang, it often meant something had happened with the family, and I picked up the receiver a bit nervously. Hello? It was Barbara on the line.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
Barbara greeted me in her usual tone. Sorry for calling out of the blue. David's not there, I assume, since it's a weekday. There's something I wanted to ask him. I see. I'll pass the message when he gets back. That would be great, thank you. Actually, Barbara explained that she had fractured her right leg recently when she missed a step on her staircase at home. She had called an ambulance herself and received treatment, but now she was finding it difficult to do shopping due to her condition.
Having a fractured leg is really troublesome. I've been able to take care of myself until now, but even small tasks have become difficult at this age.
I see. If it's okay with you, I can help out. I'm a housewife and have some free time.
What are you talking about? I know because I was a housewife too. It's tough being a housewife. Husbands expect more than just ordinary housework as if it's a given. Isn't David being demanding?
I chuckled over the phone. David is very kind and wouldn't get upset over me cutting corners with the housework. I thought Barbara, being his mom, must understand this even better than I do, maybe even more than I realize. That night, David came home unusually early. We enjoyed a delicious dinner together, sipped on slightly expensive beer, and reminisced about funny stories from when we first met. The cake David brought home was a cheesecake from my favorite shop. The shop was in the opposite direction of his workplace, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought that he went out of his way to choose my favorite shop instead of one nearby. After dinner, while doing the dishes, I told David about the call from Barbara. David came to my side while I was washing the dishes. What did you say? I wiped the washed dishes with a towel and put them back on the shelf. Barbara fractured her leg at home. She asked if you could take her to the hospital and for shopping, maybe once every 2 weeks, by car.
Once every 2 weeks? She's really holding back. Actually, someone needs to take care of Mom. Life would be uncertain otherwise.
I know it might be presumptuous, but when I offered to help, she refused. She told me to take good care of you instead. David laughed heartily and then immediately turned serious. With Fael gone, there had always been concerns about Barbara's living situation. David, somewhat reluctantly, took out his mobile phone and, while scratching his head,
Guess I should give her a call.
muttered, "Ah, it's me, David. Sis? Ah, right. David walked out of the living room with his mobile phone to his ear. The call was to Nancy. Nancy is a year older than David and works in PR for a company in the city center. Honestly, I don't know much about Nancy, who hardly ever shows up at family gatherings, but I was vaguely aware that Barbara spoke ill of her, so I knew their relationship wasn't good. David returned with a grim expression and sat down. She said she doesn't care about Mom. That's terrible. Well, it's not like we can do much either. Can't be helped. I know someone who arranges home helpers. I'll talk to them sometime. David acted swiftly, and by the following week, a home helper started visiting Barbara's house. Initially, Barbara complained, but she eventually accepted the fact that she couldn't manage everything on her own and expressed her gratitude for David's kindness. Years passed by in the blink of an eye. As usual, I opened the curtains to let in the morning sunlight. The snowdrops that used to bloom in our garden around this time every year were absent. While the green stems of these bulbous plants were growing, they hadn't blossomed into their characteristic white flowers. It happens, I thought, slightly disappointed, as I yawned. The landline rang. Caught off guard by the phone ringing mid-yawn, I ended up coughing. As I picked up the receiver, my heart rate sped up when the caller identified themselves as the reception at the university hospital.
I'll be right there.
Without asking for details, I quickly got ready and jumped into the car. I had heard that Barbara's health had been deteriorating. Frantically, I grabbed my mobile phone to inform David that I was heading to Barbara's hospital. Noticing my fingers trembling on the steering wheel, I tried to calm my nerves by taking deep breaths at a red light. It's going to be okay. It has to be. For some reason, I couldn't stop thinking about the snowdrops I had seen in the flower bed earlier. Despite their lush green stems, the absence of even a single bud made them look more like weeds, unsettling me in my current state. Upon arriving at the hospital, I found David waiting. He was in his suit, apparently having been inspecting a nearby store when I called, and had rushed over. We were just told it might be tough considering her age. David looked exhausted as he shared this with me. Leaving David outside, I lightly knocked and entered Barbara's hospital room. There, Barbara lay unconscious. Her thin arm, now much leaner, peeked out from under a white blanket, and I instinctively looked away. Despite our shock, we discussed with the doctor what steps to take next, concluding that as her family, we should care for her daily. David's job didn't allow him much time, so the majority of the caregiving fell to me, but I accepted this responsibility and continued to care for Barbara diligently. I would gently change her position and wipe her back, even though she remained unconscious. Every hour, I massaged her back and diligently rubbed her swollen legs, trying to improve her circulation. One day, I had to leave the hospital to pick up some necessities for Barbara's stay from a nearby drugstore. When I returned to the room with shopping bags in hand, I found Nancy there unexpectedly. Nancy, you came to see Barbara. I was genuinely happy that Nancy had come to visit Barbara. Despite everything, the fact that Nancy came to see her, even if it was a bit late, made me happy, thinking she must have been worried after hearing that Barbara had lost consciousness. Nancy glanced at me and then smirked unpleasantly, curling one side of her mouth. This person hasn't regained consciousness even once since being brought to the hospital, it seems. Yes, that's right. It seems her body has weakened since the fracture before. Then it's about time, isn't it? I'll prepare the funeral wreath. I was speechless at Nancy's words. Without showing any concern for me, Nancy looked down at Mom lying in the bed and said, So, I can finally say goodbye. And laughed mockingly before walking away. I was dumbfounded, unable to comprehend and too stunned to even feel angry. I sat down, placed my hand on my forehead, and sighed. This was too harsh to be a joke. Not funny at all. Is it even right to say such things about one's own parent? I don't have children, so I don't know, but I think I would be sad if my daughter spoke to me that way. As I was thinking, Barbara, who had been unconscious, slowly began to rise.
Oh my! Barbara!
I woke up because I heard Nancy's voice. That's right, there was something I wanted to tell before I die. Barbara spoke to me with a clarity unexpected from someone who had been unconscious. And I will never forget the smile on her face. Just 3 days later, Barbara passed away in the hospital where she was admitted. It was around the time when the buds on the cherry tree visible from the hospital room window were just beginning to bloom. The cherry blossoms will be here soon, I said to Barbara, and she smiled weakly. Take me outside, in a wheelchair or anything, she had said. I never thought she would pass away so soon. After Barbara passed away, David immediately notified the relatives as per the doctor's information. While the attending physician was filling out the death certificate for Barbara's body to be transported home, Nancy appeared out of nowhere. My expression darkened instantly, and I nudged David's shoulder.
See? Just like I predicted, right? I told you it was about time. Nancy. Enough is enough. Oh dear. Because you were looking after Mom for the inheritance, you find it troublesome that someone like me shows up, don't you?
I felt a rush of blood to my head, but David immediately shouted.
Get out!
He yelled. Nancy, seemingly taken aback by this, widened her eyes in surprise, but then smirked again and said,
Let's talk after the funeral is over. About what's to come.
She then left. I clenched my fists, feeling a tightness in my chest from frustration. The funeral proceeded without any hitches, but it was a challenging time for David and me. We were utterly exhausted. Most of the funeral arrangements were made by us. We contacted the funeral home, discussed the schedule and details, and held the service. Barbara had told David she preferred a small funeral, so we only invited close relatives. Nancy called us to the smoking area of the funeral home and handed us canned coffee. She took out a cigarette from her bag, lit it, and inhaled deeply with relish. We should sell the family home and split Mom's savings and other assets in half, right? Nancy asked, pointing the lit end of her cigarette towards David's face. Since neither David nor I smoked, we stood a bit away from the smoking area, resulting in our voices being raised to converse with Nancy.
We're not thinking about selling the house right now. Don't you think it's disrespectful to even discuss this so soon after the funeral? I wonder how it works in such cases. Should we assess the family home's value and then David pays me half of that? Suppressing the urge to throw the can of coffee in Nancy's face, I stepped forward, ahead of David. Nancy looked at me somewhat surprised, stubbed out her cigarette in the ashtray, and lit another one. Actually, Barbara mentioned there was a will. A will? I haven't heard about it. On that day you showed such disrespect to Barbara, who was unconscious. Barbara told me she had prepared a will while she was still in good health. And she told me what's in it. Barbara, on that day, had left a note written hastily on stationery about the general contents of her will and a memo stating that no one was allowed to contest it. She had already entrusted the actual will to a notary, so she couldn't show it, but she weakly smiled, saying she remembered the contents well that she had noted down. When Barbara handed me the envelope containing the hastily written note, her expression was serene, as if she had resolved any lingering regrets.
Nancy, with a cigarette between her lips, read the contents labeled will. Her expression gradually hardened, and when her gaze shifted from the will to me, she stubbed out her cigarette and approached. As Nancy got closer, the smell of cigarette prompted me to grimace involuntarily.
What do you mean by this? You're saying all of Mom's inheritance goes to you guys? Don't joke with me.
I glared at Nancy with a firm stance. When Barbara handed me this will, she had held my hand, thanked me, and with a face of sorrow I had never seen before, she pleaded. Please. I couldn't erase Barbara's beseeching face from my mind.
There's one will, but there's another document Barbara left behind. She asked me to make sure it's enforced, even if it means going to court. Don't beat around the bush. Just hand it over. What is this document? It's a promissory note.
At that, Nancy slightly raised her eyebrows and placed her hand on her chin.
What does that mean?
She seemed to be pondering, but it was clear Nancy didn't understand the significance of the term promissory note in this context. That was understandable. To be honest, I was also surprised when I first saw this promissory note. Whether Barbara was meticulous by nature or just precise about financial matters, she had recorded in great detail the money she had lent to her daughter, Nancy. The record of debts, listed with dates, times, amounts lent, and reasons, filled about half of the notebook. Most entries hinted at Nancy's financial contributions to boyfriends she had dated when she was younger. After I briefly explained the contents of the promissory note, Nancy confronted me, her face pale.
She recorded everything in such detail. Always criticizing the people I dated, always something. Linda, how much does it all come to? There's at least $80,000. However, there's no mention of the interest rate, so the statutory rate would apply. The actual amount on the promissory note was about $25,000, but I lied effortlessly. The repayment deadline had long passed, and Nancy, having some legal knowledge, would understand that this story didn't add up. Yet, I pressed on. I couldn't let Nancy take away the savings Barbara had accumulated or the family home she cherished. The original is with a lawyer, but Barbara had one suggestion before we proceed with a claim against Nancy.
Nancy was clearly flustered by this unexpected turn of events. While contemplating whether to light another cigarette and idly twirling it between her fingers, I conveyed to Nancy what Barbara had told me. If she didn't contest the inheritance, we would let the matter of the debt slide.
Most of Barbara's savings were used for the funeral, and selling the family home will take time. If you contest the inheritance, the debt repayment will commence immediately, which would surely complicate your life.
I tried to speak as gently as possible, not wanting to provoke Nancy. David, standing beside me, looked tense, glancing back and forth between Nancy and me. Soon, a staff member from the crematorium came too. We're ready. Inform us. Watching Barbara's body being placed in the cremation chamber was a moment of profound sorrow, even for me. It must have been even more difficult for David. Yet, strangely, seeing her reduced to ashes brought a sense of peace. As we waited for the bus to take us home from the crematorium, David looked relieved, taking deep breaths of the fresh outdoor air. I stood silently by his side until Nancy approached us awkwardly and said,
I'll go by the will. But please spare me the loan part. What about selling the family home? You can handle it however you like. But I can't pay back the loan.
After saying that, she didn't wait for our response and returned to the smoking area. David remained silent. Watching Nancy's retreating figure, he seemed to want to say something witty but eventually just looked down, resigned. Later, it was revealed that Nancy had quit her job, hoping to inherit from Barbara. She had moved to a downtown apartment and indulged in nightclub visits and luxury shopping, leading to financial distress. It was baffling how she could make such decisions. Believing there was a significant inheritance, Barbara had indeed lent Nancy a considerable amount of money, perhaps fostering Nancy's belief in available funds. Forced to move to a standard apartment and start a part-time job, Nancy's arrogant attitude led to her quick dismissal, and she eventually had to leave that apartment too. At the family court, when Barbara's will was unsealed in the presence of witnesses, it confirmed that all her assets were left to David and me, as Barbara had stated. Though it was expected, Nancy remained silent, sighing deeply and looking defeated. Nancy is now scraping by with a live-in part-time job, but we have no sympathy for her. David, her brother, shares my reluctance to interact further, and one day, the landline was removed from our home. We've decided to keep in touch only with close relatives. Yet, there's a part of me that wonders if this lonely conclusion was truly for the best. I wonder if this was truly the right ending for Barbara. Time passed, and as the first anniversary of Barbara's passing approached, having received the inheritance, we built a respectable grave and continued to live our lives as usual, mindful not to waste money unnecessarily. On a warm day heralding the arrival of spring, I noticed the white snowdrops that hadn't bloomed last year now adorning the flower bed visible through the open window. These flowers hung towards the ground, swaying like earrings. I couldn't help but step outside and bend down to admire the flowers in the flower bed. Among them were low-lying pansies and violas, adding a vibrant splash of color. I gently touched the snowdrops with my fingertips. David returned from a neighborhood stroll on his bicycle, his basket filled with various vegetables.
What's with all these vegetables?
Got them from the local farmer's market. They were cheap, so I bought a bunch.
Even if they were cheap, this is a lot.
Seeing the basket brimming with vegetables, I exclaimed,
"Ah!"
And with a slightly mischievous expression, I suggested to David,
"Let's use these vegetables to make a variety of dishes that celebrate spring." "All of them? You think we can eat that much?"
"Why not invite Nancy over?" David widened his eyes, his smile tinged with disbelief, as if he'd misheard me. Nancy would likely have plenty of complaints about my vegetable dishes. But even if she's not fond of them, making fried vegetables might soften their bitterness, making them palatable. Still, Nancy might refuse to eat or even decline the invitation to our home altogether. Yet, if she did come over, I'd insist on showing her the snowdrops blooming in the garden. I'd bring her to the flower bed, have her sit where I am, and even suggest visiting Barbara's grave together, though she'd surely refuse. But if she found the flowers beautiful, I believe we might come to understand each other, even if just a little. Should go on that trip, I said with a cold voice, only to be met with an annoyed glare from my husband. He was getting ready to join his company's retreat, clearly not thrilled about my input.
"Look, it's not like I'm going out to play. It's a social obligation, and I can't just not show up without a good reason,"
he retorted in a mocking tone, followed by an exaggerated sigh. "Well, I've warned you. Just don't regret it later," I responded. My name is Grace. Currently, I'm a 28-year-old housewife. Anthony, my husband, and I have been together since our college days and got married after we both started working. He's 2 years older than me, and we got closer because we were in the same club. Well, to be more accurate, I joined the club because I was attracted to him. When I was a freshman, I was club hopping with some new friends I made. That's when I met Anthony, who was exceptionally noticeable due to his good looks while handing out flyers as the head of the club. One of my friends fell for him instantly and decided to join the club even before hearing what it was about. Eventually, dragged along by her enthusiasm, the rest of us submitted our membership forms and started participating. Unlike in middle or high school, I figured if I didn't like the club since it was just a hobby, I could just leave. That was the mindset of my other friends too, and we had agreed to join something anyways. Deep down, I also found Anthony charming. However, when the friend who had decided to join because of him started making moves, I decided to step back. Plus, there were quite a few other fans of his, making it difficult to get close. But, how did I end up marrying him, you might ask? It was during the cultural festival that year, where our relationship rapidly developed. We were part of the music club, which performed in several groups during the festival. Anthony and I, along with a few others, ended up forming a band. For the first time, I felt genuinely glad to have joined the club and practiced an instrument. Discovering the joy of playing, I spent my free time in the club room. As the festival approached, I was there even more often. Sometimes, it was just Anthony and me, and through these moments, we grew closer and started dating after the festival, with me making the first move. However, after our successful performance at the festival, Anthony gained more admirers, and I chose to keep our relationship a secret. I wanted to brag about being with him, and he said it was unnecessary to hide. But he didn't understand my fear of other women's jealousy. We often targeted weekdays when it was less crowded for our outings. It felt like a secret date, which was fun in its own way, and I cherished the time I could spend with my husband. But then, he started his job search. Until he got an offer, even my usually calm husband was understandably tense. He seemed to have less time for part-time jobs, often complaining about being broke every time we met. Since the days we could meet were getting fewer, I secretly increased my shifts and used the money I earned to cook for him.
I feel pathetic having to rely on this,
he would say, yet he happily devoured every meal I made. From that time, I vaguely imagined our life together as a married couple, though I thought it was too soon to mention it to my busy boyfriend. Eventually, when he landed a job and graduated, and I had my graduation confirmed, we got engaged. He rented a new apartment due to his job, and I often visited, almost living there. We were in a semi-cohabiting state, but he paid for the rent and utilities with his salary, so I helped out with household chores in return. I would make meals to last several days and store them in the fridge, take out the trash in the morning, and clean the bathroom and toilet. I thought I was doing well, but it turned out my husband was quite lazy. When I couldn't come over for a week due to some errands, I found the floor littered with trash. Maybe because it was his first year working, he often had entertainment duties and would leave the room unventilated. Opening the door to a room filled with the smell of sweat and garbage required bravery. But I loved my hard-working husband, and I appreciated his thoughtfulness, like bringing home fancy sweets to say thank you. After graduating, I worked in an office for a year, but then, at my husband's strong request, I became a housewife. The reason was simple. I want you to take care of the house. His lifestyle habits remained the same, with me handling most of the household chores. Additionally, the number of drinking parties increased over the years, making financial management challenging. However, since we lived on my husband's income, it was hard to ask him to cut down on social gatherings. He was supportive when I occasionally met with friends, even giving me some pocket money for those outings. But I couldn't stay silent and watch our household expenses increase, so I brought it up with him several times. At first, he would say, "It's okay, the entertaining expenses are covered by the company. The money comes back." But gradually, he started giving specific reasons, like, "Today is a colleague's birthday," or "I can't miss a promotion celebration." It became harder for me to object. My husband had a close group of friends at work. I heard from a university friend who also landed a job there. That friend was the one who had a crush on him and led us to join the club. She was already married and said it was a coincidence that she ended up working at the same place as my husband. When I mentioned my husband was Anthony, she had to think for a moment.
Who was that again?
It seems she had completely forgotten about the man she once eagerly pursued. She told me a lot about my husband. He was always with his close-knit group, and there were no other women involved, which was a relief. But the weekly spending on drinks was a problem. I kept asking him to cut back on the drinking sessions, but he couldn't refuse invitations from dear friends. Even when I argued about the expenses, he only suggested reducing the amount spent per occasion instead of not going at all. Looking back, we should have had a serious discussion about this early in our marriage. As time went on, things became more ambiguous, and I started to give up. My husband stopped mentioning his outings unless I asked, and it seemed like he had created his own rule of going out on weekends. Approaching his 30s, he hadn't changed his living habits from his student days, only capable of leaving his clothes on the floor. I had gotten used to taking care of him, so even though I was frustrated, I stopped bringing it up. I figured if we were going to fight about it, I might as well let him do what he wanted. Then one day, my husband mentioned he would be joining the company's retreat.
A company retreat when it's not even a long weekend? If it were during the long weekend, everywhere would be crowded. The idea is to go at a different time so we can actually relax.
He explained. I'm okay with him participating in the trip since he's been working hard. But the cost is what worries me. Even if the travel expenses are covered, things like meals and souvenirs will likely be out of pocket. With the warmer days, his drinking outings have become more frequent, and our expenses have grown more severe. And there's something about this retreat that's bothering me.
Maybe you should skip it? You've been really busy lately and must be exhausted. It's a work obligation, and everyone's expected to go,
he said, though his expression softened. He seemed really keen on going. For once, I pressed harder.
Are you sure you want to go? We can't afford to spend more right now with all our bills.
Thinking I was angry, he raised his voice.
Are you seriously telling me not to go now? You say we don't have money, but it's all coming from my salary anyway. Don't act so high and mighty.
It seems he made me a housewife just to say this, thinking it would silence me. True to form, I stayed quiet, and he, feeling reassured, said,
You've had fewer friends since we got married. You're just jealous of me.
I was irritated but too dismayed to retort. Who's been sacrificing social ties to keep this household running? I was on the verge of saying it, but lacked the energy to bother.
Fine, do whatever you want.
At that, he momentarily looked triumphant. Then patronizingly patted my head, asking sweetly,
What would you like for a souvenir?
Ever since college, he's believed his wife adores him. Having been quite popular, his self-esteem seems quite inflated. His life has been so charmed that his lack of malice is actually more problematic. Turns out, the trip was set for the very next day, and he left early in the morning, full of enthusiasm. Surprisingly, he managed all the preparations himself, dragging along a neat suitcase he must have bought at some point. During the week he was gone, I had a peaceful time. It made me wonder if this is how it feels when your children are grown and independent. I've essentially been raising a large child for years. Taking a week off won't hurt. By the time he returned from the trip, it was already late at night. He seemed a bit worn out, probably from taking the night bus.
Were you okay this week? I was worried about the bills and everything.
Yeah, everything was fine, I assured him.
See, I told you there was nothing to worry about. I'll start earning again from next week, so don't fret,
he said, perhaps a bit smugly after drinking on the bus. I was annoyed but didn't show it, simply replying, "Maybe so," and tried to leave. However, he didn't like my response and shouted after me,
"What's with that attitude?"
As he's gotten older, he tends to get angry suddenly when he got drunk. I was surprised at first, but now it's become routine whenever he returns from drinking. "I'm tired too. Please don't raise your voice. Make sure all your laundry is in the basket, and if there's trash, sort it out. I'm going to bed now." He said something else, but I quickly went to bed. The next morning, his phone rang early. Annoyed, he got up, glanced at the screen, and clicked his tongue. I took the day off. What now? It was his office calling. He got up, left the bedroom. And I secretly watched, somewhat predicting what would happen next. After a few minutes on the phone, he changed into a suit and left the house. Wondering when he would come back, I woke up to wash the pile of clothes he had left behind. It was a few hours later when my husband returned. As soon as he entered the house, he called out to me, shouting,
"This is all your fault for causing such a mess."
Let's rewind to a week ago. In the evening, after hearing about the company retreat from my husband, I immediately called a friend. I had never heard about the retreat from her, despite our daily chats. When she said,
"There's no company retreat,"
I realized something. My husband probably lied about going on the retreat to avoid being stopped by me. Perhaps to hang out with those colleagues, or maybe even to meet another woman. Either way, I no longer cared. Who would sympathize with a husband who lies and abandons his wife to go out? Before I knew it, I was asking my friend for a favor. To report this to the company. After all, we were barely making ends meet. There was no way he could afford a week-long trip on his own. If the retreat was a lie, where would the money for it come from? Though I didn't want to think about it, my friend and I eventually came to the same conclusion. I told her it would be great if she could say she was the one who leaked it. My friend seemed to have acted immediately. The company waited for them to return from their trip and then called them in. During that time, the company thoroughly investigated them. What followed was a series of records of misused expenses being uncovered. Their desks were found to be filled with blank receipts from various stores. They likely used these to falsely claim expenses for their numerous drinking outings, applying this money towards their trip this time. This was mostly accurate, and they admitted their guilt when called in.
"We plan to submit it as a business expense for the retreat,"
they confessed. Everyone involved had repeatedly misused expenses, leading to a total loss of around several $1,000s. Naturally, they were all dismissed and faced claims for restitution and damages. Furious upon returning, my husband yelled at me,
"This is all your fault."
I don't know why he thought I reported him to the company. Since my friend was the one who actually reported it, I was relieved she wouldn't be harmed. Ignoring his own actions, he raged in front of me, where I presented him with the already filled-out divorce papers.
"Getting caught was your own fault. That's why I told you to cancel the trip. But if you've been doing this all along, it was bound to come out sooner or later."
Though he glared and trembled, he snatched the divorce papers, saying,
"I'm better off without a snitching, spiteful wife,"
and threw them at me as if to slap me with them.
"Good, this makes things easier. Goodbye, then."
With that, I left, carrying the bags I had already packed. He kept his back to me until I left the room, perhaps out of pride. I caught a glimpse of his graying hairline and felt a twinge of sadness for the Anthony I once admired. Then, I headed to the small apartment I had already arranged. I never thought I'd use my savings from a year of work this way. Although I had some savings, the initial moving costs significantly depleted. Now, I need to find a job. After being a housewife for so long without any particular qualifications, I wonder if I can find work. At first, any job will do. I decided to work and become independent. After informing my parents about the finalized divorce, I also contacted my friend. One of them, concerned about me, suggested we meet up after a long time. That's right. Now that I'm divorced, I should live my life freely. I won't be forced to do household chores for anyone else. I just need to take care of myself. What a freedom. The next day, after spending a day unpacking, I immediately started looking for a job. I found some listings on job sites, prepared my applications, and went for interviews. Before I knew it, 2 weeks had passed while I was busy with this routine. The calls from my ex-husband became more frequent. On the other end of the phone, Anthony alternated between anger and tears. Having relied on me for household and financial management, he had run out of money within these 2 weeks. He had no savings habit, so his account was completely empty. With several bills due at the end of the month, Anthony asked me for a loan, saying, "We're divorced, so I have no obligation to pay for you. If you really need a loan, are you okay with interest?
Why do you have spare money? Aren't you ashamed to have been saving secretly just for yourself? This calls for a redistribution of property. Come back right now."
Anthony, infuriated by my advantageous position, screamed so loudly the audio cracked.
It's fine if you want to claim a redistribution of property, but that process is complicated and time-consuming. By the time you get it sorted, the month's end will be here. Then come over right now and give me half. Or remarry me for a while and take care of me.
Frustrated by Anthony's self-centered demands, I ended the call without a word. I realized there was no getting through to him, and the thought of still being liked by him became physically repulsive. Of course, after setting my phone to block his calls, they stopped. Eventually, I secured a job at a food factory. Wanting to avoid any trouble with Anthony, I opted for a behind-the-scenes role. Working and sweating after a long break felt refreshing. Being single again, I reconnected with friends from my student days and started going out more. After a few meetings, my friends said I looked rejuvenated, and I felt a profound sense of fulfillment in my daily life.
I never imagined our house could be burgled,
I muttered to myself. The day after our home was burglarized, I still couldn't grasp that it had happened to me. I was reflecting on my inability to act at the moment. Mother-in-law, concerned, hurriedly asked, "Did you see the face of the culprit?" However, an event that would save me from despair happened shortly after. My name is Mia. I'm 29 years old. I was married to Thomas, a year older than me, and we had a reasonably happy life. But recently, after losing Dad, I've felt a gaping hole in my heart. Dad gave me not only a lot of love, but also many lessons. Even after retiring, Dad never felt left behind by the current times. I remember him studying about money with enthusiasm, even as many others settled into a quiet life receiving their pensions. Dad continued to learn new things after retirement, never stopping despite my concerns. Worried, I suggested, "Dad, you've retired from your job. Why not take a break for a while?" But Dad, with a cheerful smile, replied,
"I've worked hard for many years and can't suddenly stop. I'm just doing things I'm interested in as my way of preventing dementia. Don't worry about me." Half in disbelief yet fond of Dad, I watched over his actions, thinking if it's what he likes, then it's okay. When I got married, Dad was overjoyed, saying, "I'm relieved to see Mia so happy. I have no regrets in this world." With tears in his eyes. My husband and I, telling Dad to stop joking, laughed together.
A few days after the wedding, Dad and I spent some father-daughter time together, during which he said,
Mia, I'll leave you plenty of money, so don't worry about finances even if you start a family.
To which I replied, Dad, I appreciate the thought, but don't waste your retirement like that. Actually, I want to take you on a trip. Let's enjoy some leisure time together. I thought I'd finally be able to show my gratitude. However, Dad, who had been so vibrant, suddenly passed away, and I was left feeling hopeless after the funeral. Seeing Dad's inheritance was shocking. Gold bars? I was speechless at the sight, not knowing their significance initially. But I soon learned of Dad's intentions. Research revealed that gold bars hold their value over years, hardly depreciating. Dad left me a lasting fortune to secure my future even decades after his passing. Reflecting on it, Dad often said,
In today's world, the value of money can fluctuate, so Mia, you should do your research.
At the time, I dismissed it due to daily busyness. Realizing now that Dad converted his wealth into gold bars to leave it for me, I couldn't be more grateful. Wanting to honor Dad's wishes, I kept the gold bars hidden even from my husband. Yet, someone had the audacity to say,
I heard Mia's dad passed away, so you must have gotten a hefty inheritance, right? Share some with me.
Shockingly, these words came from my husband. His words were so unthinkable that I didn't respond. Then he said,
I've been feeling unmotivated at work and thinking of quitting to make a quick fortune. Winning a little makes me feel recognized, and it'd be a relief for you too if I became wealthy, right?
Realizing what he meant, I asked,
Is that some kind of gambling?
He boasted,
Well, kinda. But I'm not like those unsuccessful gamblers.
I thought about discussing and deciding together on necessities like a house or car for us as a couple. But then, my husband started saying,
I also want to upgrade everything I wear to high-end brands.
I was speechless, not knowing he was this kind of person. I decided to keep it stored in a safe that only I could access. To me, what Dad left behind is as precious as life itself. I couldn't bear to squander it on my husband's whims, so I refused. However, since he wouldn't give up asking, I took the bold step of consulting my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law had been supportive since I was dating her son and continued to be so after marriage. After I told mother-in-law everything, she listened, nodding, and said, I'm sorry about this. Let's have a discussion, the three of us. When I mentioned to my husband that we would discuss Dad's inheritance with mother-in-law, he seemed thrilled, thinking his wishes would finally be met. Later, eager to state his case, he said,
Given the uncertainty of lifelong employment, I've been working on a side hustle. I'd like a share of Mia's dad's inheritance to make it successful.
A side hustle, or rather, gambling. I almost blurted out, but mother-in-law immediately mentioned, I saw you entering a slot shop recently. The room froze at her words. My husband made feeble excuses but was asked by mother-in-law to show his savings, revealing almost nothing. Mother-in-law scolded him with an expression I'd never seen before.
Thomas, enough is enough. Work properly without complaints. If you target Mia's dad's inheritance again, I won't forgive you.
Yet, my husband responded with dissatisfaction.
Okay, I get it. But you're both taking a joke too seriously.
I said,
There are things you can joke about and things you shouldn't.
To which mother-in-law added,
Exactly. Haven't I always taught you that?
Embarrassed by the scolding from both of us, he left for home as if fleeing. I thanked mother-in-law, saying,
I couldn't have persuaded him alone. Thank you.
Mother-in-law replied, It's okay. Thank you for marrying such a son. In return, she thanked me. Then she muttered, Thomas really is a handful. I didn't miss a word and asked, "Does that mean Stephen too?" Mother-in-law nodded slightly. I knew Thomas had a brother named Stephen but hadn't really spoken to him. We only greeted each other during a family meeting, and I remembered his voice being deeper than Thomas's. I regret not having tried to interact more, not knowing how to approach him. I took this opportunity to ask mother-in-law about brother-in-law. Mother-in-law said, "Stephen quits jobs as soon as he dislikes them and is currently freelancing. I'm worried about his future. I wish he would settle into a stable job, but job changes are becoming more common these days." Mother-in-law continued, but it seemed brother-in-law's reasons for quitting were somewhat trivial. Mother-in-law had been worried for a long time. I couldn't admonish brother-in-law myself, so I just listened to mother-in-law, who had been worried for a long time. Worried about mother-in-law's well-being, I bought a concert ticket for her too. And we decided to go together, hoping it would help her relax and refresh. On the day of the concert, my husband had already left for work, and I was looking forward to it with mother-in-law. But after walking a bit, I felt like I had forgotten something. After rummaging through my bag, I realized in horror. I'm sorry. I forgot the most important thing, the tickets. When I told mother-in-law, she surprisingly said, "It's okay. We can go back and make it. Let's go together." I'm sorry. Please wait here. I'll run back and get them. And ran off. I burst through the front door, heading straight for the room. There, in front of the safe containing Dad's inheritance, I encountered a person clad entirely in black. In my haste, and unsure if I was dreaming or awake, I screamed. The burglar shoved me aside and fled. Although I was confused about what was happening, I confirmed the burglar had taken the gold bars, and immediately called the police. I explained everything to mother-in-law at home and apologized. When the police arrived and I was describing the burglar's features and the situation, mother-in-law rushed over to my house, anxiously asking,
"Mia, are you okay? You really encountered the burglar? Did you see his face? Did you tell the police everything?" I shook my head in despair.
While mother-in-law was saddened, I reassured her. "It's okay. The police are here, taking my statement." Then, looking at the safe, mother-in-law lamented, "Oh, what a mess." I hadn't shared the code or hiding place with anyone. Although it was only until I could deposit them in a bank safe, the safe I had chosen was among the most secure available commercially, supposedly impervious to ordinary household tools. The police, having seen the scene, speculated that the burglar either had specialized tools or was an experienced criminal. I continued to provide details to the police. Afterwards, I told mother-in-law, "The investigation will start now and it might take a while, so please go back home and rest for now. I'm sorry for today." Mother-in-law responded,
"All right. I don't want to be in the way. I'll contact you later,"
and left. However, mother-in-law returned about an hour later, drenched in sweat.
"Mia, listen,"
she exclaimed, causing me and the police to freeze and turn towards her. "What happened?" I asked, to which mother-in-law revealed.
"When I went back, I saw Stephen entering his room with something that looked like gold bars. I thought I should get evidence before confronting him, so I didn't question him right away. It's about your dad's inheritance, isn't it?"
When mother-in-law mentioned that, I immediately responded,
"It's the gold bars,"
mother-in-law said.
"Understood. Now, listen to this,"
and played a recording from her phone for us. I managed to get the stuff out, but Mia caught me at the worst possible moment. Really screwed up there. Annoying how she showed up just then. The recording clearly captured someone speaking foully. That low and distinctive voice was unmistakably Stephen's. I was certain of it. It also captured a strategy session over the phone with my husband on how to deceive the police if questioned. After recording the scene, mother-in-law, though shocked, submitted it to the police. Apologizing, mother-in-law said, "I'm really sorry for causing you distress. I just thought I had to secure some evidence." I quickly assured her, "You did nothing wrong, Thomas's mom. My primary concern is catching the burglar as soon as possible. Your evidence was incredibly helpful." "Thank you." The police immediately headed to brother-in-law's location, where he confessed to conspiring with my husband.
Thomas wanted the gold bars to pay compensation to his mistress's husband,
Brother-in-law revealed. Mother-in-law and I were stunned, blurting out,
"What? An affair?"
Nodding, brother-in-law continued,
"My brother was trying to convince Mia to hand over the gold bars to cover up the affair without it being discovered."
Hearing this, I remarked,
"Thomas said he was gambling, thinking that would convince me."
Brother-in-law replied,
"He started gambling on his own, hoping to pay off without any help. But as his savings dwindled, he became desperate and tried to persuade Mia to give him the gold bars."
That explains the time my husband begged for money. I thought to myself. When I asked,
And then,
brother-in-law continued,
a few days later, when Mia wouldn't agree, Thomas called again, saying we'd execute the burglary plan on a day Mia was out. He promised me a share if we succeeded, so I followed his instructions and committed the crime.
Hearing this, I realized my husband had his brother do it, likely because he knew his own physique and mannerisms might give him away. Not only was Dad's inheritance stolen, but I also learned of the affair, and I decided it was over with my husband. Just as brother-in-law had confessed, my husband returned home.
"Mia, I've heard about what happened. Are you hurt? Everything okay?"
He asked, putting on a poorly acted concern. Unaware of brother-in-law's confession, my husband was puzzled by the cold looks around him, saying,
"Well, losing Dad's precious inheritance is sad, but what's lost is lost, right? We can rebuild our fortune together from scratch."
Trying to dismiss the police and grab my shoulder. Disgusted by my husband after hearing everything from brother-in-law, I pushed him away, saying,
"Stop. Don't touch me."
Surprised, he looked at me.
"Mia, what's gotten into you all of a sudden? You're scared of the police, right? Let's talk, just the two of us."
Trying to drag me outside forcibly. I resisted, but he was too strong and dragged me along, leaving me feeling helpless. The police intervened. She said to stop, so let her go, restraining him with several officers.
"Everything from the burglary plan to your affair has been exposed,"
the police informed him as he struggled and attempted to flee. However, his escape was futile and he was caught. Thus, the gold bars were safely returned to me. The day after the burglary incident, still in disbelief, I muttered to myself,
"I never imagined a burglary could happen at my house."
Unforgivable actions by my husband and brother-in-law led me to file a lawsuit immediately. While my husband received a suspended sentence, brother-in-law, having no job and supporting himself through crime, was found guilty of other offenses and received a prison sentence. Brother-in-law had the tools for the job, and it wasn't his first time breaking safes. I hoped this would be a wake-up call for others involved in crime. Mother-in-law, devastated by her son's actions, tearfully said,
"I hope they fully pay for their crimes."
My heart ached, but preventing further victims was necessary. I demanded compensation from my husband and his mistress. My husband, now facing a slew of misfortunes, desperately pleaded,
"Let's not divorce,
Mia. It was all my fault. I only love you. I can't pay the compensation. Resorting to tears, but I felt no sympathy and refused to forgive him. How are you planning to cash them? Did you really think you could just walk into a shop with a large amount of gold bars and smoothly sell them? You need a personal number to sell something of this size. Did you think you could just use the inheritance I received as you pleased? Stumbling over his words, my husband admitted, "When you put it that way, yes." He knew he had no right to decide how to use my inherited wealth. Blinded by immediate financial gain, you didn't think through the consequences of your actions. I told him, and he could only look down, silent. Searching for a way to break into such a sturdy safe, committing a crime to get his hands on it. Yet not thinking about the aftermath at all was absurdly foolish. I announced our divorce right there and then. Finally, after all the procedures were completed, I felt relieved. The move, funded by my husband's compensation, was completed. I became a free person. As for my husband, his misdeeds were exposed to his company, leading to his job loss. Disowned by his family and with no savings, he began doing day labor to pay the compensation. Struggling with his deteriorating life and failing workplace relationships. It seems he planned another burglary due to being unable to cope with these challenges. Naturally, without any accomplices, he was caught by the returning residents and beaten. It's the second time. Please have mercy. My husband reportedly pleaded, but the residents mercilessly called the police. He was sentenced to prison. This time, he truly couldn't return to a normal life. The burglary occurred near my previous home, and I heard the story directly from the neighbor involved. After the first burglary at my former house, my husband became well known throughout the neighborhood. Without the means to go far, he committed another crime nearby. Finally, we parted with, "It's a dangerous world out there. Let's both be careful. Take care." After the trial, mother-in-law was mentally damaged and struggled to recover. So, I frequently visited and maintained our relationship. I wanted to do everything I could for mother-in-law, who had always been kind to me. Thanks to my care, mother-in-law gradually recovered. We still have a good relationship today. I want to live my life gratefully for the peaceful days and the people around me, hoping for this tranquility to last forever. I want a divorce. Fine, but I'm not paying any alimony in a divorce trial, you know? You don't work, so you must not have any money. Are you okay with that? More than money, protecting my own happiness is much more important. I don't want to stay in this house, nor do I want to live with this man. I'll definitely divorce and make you regret it. My name is Carolina. I was born and raised in the countryside, 58 years old, and picking mountain vegetables becomes my hobby when the weather gets warm. I love the peaceful countryside air, but there was a time in my life when I resented being from the countryside. Back then, I was in my 20s. After graduating high school, I got a job at a local department store, a position only offered to top students. I believe I lived a more glamorous life than others my age. Then one day, my boss said, "A VIP customer is coming." And I was assigned to assist a certain individual. That was my husband, Louis. Louis's family had produced a member of parliament, and even though Louis's direct family wasn't in politics, they were a well-known local business family. As the eldest son, Louis was set to inherit the family business and had significant influence locally. However, in the larger scope, their business was just one of many competitors. In the city, they would probably be overshadowed. Yet, in our area, Louis was something like a local king. But it was this assignment in the store that led to Louis taking a fancy to me. People around me said things like, "Marrying a rich man, you're so lucky, your future is secure." But I wasn't happy at all. Lewis's family, the Warners, had a lot of bad rumors because of their influence locally. Arrogant, quick to fire employees they didn't like, secretly dating several pretty female employees. How much of it was true, I, a recent high school graduate, couldn't tell. But where there's smoke, there's fire. There must be some truth to the issues they faced. Lewis's approach was persistent, no, passionate, and he often waited in his car outside my workplace until I finished work. He gave me bouquets, treated me to dinners at fancy restaurants, various ways of showing his affection. However, as I talked more with Lewis, I started to think. Despite all the rumors about his family, maybe he's a serious and good person? So, I started dating him, and eventually, we got married. Right after our marriage, my in-laws gifted us a house. They said it was a wedding present. I was used to more modest wedding gifts, so it surprised me. Lewis accepted it as if it were normal. I realized then that we lived in different worlds. I never imagined that this house would turn out to be akin to a devil's dwelling. After moving in with Lewis, his mother, Catherine, started visiting our home frequently. Mostly without a specific reason, I just had to listen to her complaints about my father-in-law, Hector, all day. Apparently, Catherine had many issues with Hector. He doesn't pay attention to her, isn't grateful, even the argument they had 10 years ago. There's no end to Catherine's unpleasant stories. Not only about Hector but also about the family driver's way of speaking, the attitude of the company secretary, even the neighbor's clothing. She found something to complain about in everything. It was stressful having to listen to these stories every time. Even it would be still acceptable if you're helping with the family business, it's a disgrace to work outside as a Warner family daughter-in-law. As she said so, I had quit my job at the department store after getting married, so I had no way to avoid her frequent visits. Initially, she visited mostly on weekdays when Lewis was away, but gradually she started coming over on weekends too. That probably wasn't good. Even though we were newlyweds, Lewis began spending more time away from home. Catherine doted on him. Regarding our marriage, she had said,
I wouldn't have allowed it if she wasn't a woman I approved of.
And there were quite strict conditions for a marriage partner. I wasn't highly educated, from a good family, or skilled in household chores as she wanted, but my ordinary face and knowing my place were preferred. A son's wife shouldn't be opinionated, always walk behind the men of the Warner family, it seems. Perhaps because I wasn't too flashy, my ordinary face was favored. My demeanor. I was just scared to speak with someone from a powerful family, but they took it as knowing my place. Thanks to that, now I can't say, Catherine, I've heard this complaint from you before. Half a year into the marriage, Lewis hardly came home, and I started to wonder if I married him or Catherine. Then, his affair was discovered. One night, when he returned home in a company car, I accidentally witnessed from the window him kissing a woman in the back seat before parting ways. The driver didn't seem particularly flustered. As soon as they finished their exchange, the driver smoothly drove off, as if accustomed to their affairs.
Hey! What was that just now?
Naturally, I confronted Lewis, who entered the house with a calm face. I couldn't forgive infidelity less than a year into our marriage, especially after such a passionate pursuit before marriage. However, his reaction was completely different from what I expected. Don't make a fuss over one or two women. Instead, prepare dinner. I was speechless at his attitude, untying his tie and heading to the living room. He wasn't even trying to hide it, but rather being defiant.
Wait. Explain. Who was that woman?
You're noisy. She's a woman from the company. A new employee, I'm just looking after her.
You're a high-ranking official. You're not in a position to look after new employees. What kind of care are you providing?
Enough, I'm tired. Be quiet. With that, he forcefully shook off my hand. I was pushed hard on the shoulder and fell to the floor. Calm down. I'm displeased, I'm taking a shower. Leaving me with a cold gaze, he really went to take a shower. The sound of the shower echoing in the room felt emptily surreal, and I deeply regretted marrying such a person. The next day, Catherine, as usual, came to our house and spoke to me in a clearly bad mood. "Carolina, sit down there."
What?
Confused, I was forcibly pushed to the floor by the secretary who entered the room with her.
What is this about?
"You yelled at Louis yesterday, who was tired from work, didn't you? Is that what a wife does?"
How do you know that? But that's because I saw him kissing a woman in front of the house. It's natural to ask what that was about.
"I was told by him to warn you. Honestly. As a Warner family woman, you should turn a blind eye to one or two outside women."
Are you saying I should tolerate infidelity and pretend not to see it?
Great men in the past had many women. That's what it means to have power. I can't accept this. This family is really strange.
That's it. I'm divorcing Louis.
Saying it out loud made me tear up for the first time. Despite everything, I did love Louis. I never imagined choosing to leave him in such a manner on our wedding day, but
There's no way I'll allow that. What nonsense are you talking about?
I involuntarily shrank back at Catherine's furious demeanor. After a heavy sigh, Catherine took out her mobile phone and made a call to somewhere.
Hi, yes, sorry Hector. Could you come home for a moment? Is it okay now? Yes, understood.
As soon as she hung up the phone, she glared at me and said, "We're going to our house." Despite my resistance, I was forcibly dragged by the secretary, put in a car, and taken to my in-laws' house. Or more precisely, to the barn of my in-laws' house. Shortly after our arrival, Hector, father-in-law, also appeared. It seems he was the one Catherine had called earlier.
"Carolina, you said you wanted a divorce?"
Hector sneered at me.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but that's not acceptable. We can't have a scandal of a Warner family man being left by his wife.
I don't care about that.
Just as I tried to argue back, he grabbed my hair.
Listen, what I and Louis say is absolute. You have no right to refuse. Understand that until you calm down.
Saying this, he roughly let go of my hair, and I staggered backward.
"Let's go,"
Hector commanded.
"Just do your duty."
Catherine left these words behind and walked out of the barn with Hector. Hearing the sound of the key, I realized I was locked in. Panicking, I banged on the door and screamed to be let out, but someone who seemed to be the secretary said through the door,
"I'm afraid that's not possible,"
and then ignored me completely. 12 hours later, locked in the hot and humid barn, I was on the verge of dehydration when I was finally released. Exhausted, Catherine asked me,
"Have you calmed down?"
and handed me a bottle of water. Drinking the water hastily made me feel sick, and I was too exhausted to think. Far from calming down, I couldn't think of anything. Led by Catherine into the house, I saw Louis and a woman next to him.
"Have you reflected?"
"Carolina,
I'm willing to forgive you if you have.
I still like you." Seeing his smiling face made my spine chill. "No, I can't have a conversation with this person.
And, starting today, this lady will live with us too. This is Lisa. Get along."
Looking at the woman, I vaguely remembered the scene. This woman was the one he was kissing.
What are you thinking? Why do I have to live with your affair partner?
Hey, are you saying you have a problem with that?
Of course I do. This is weird, this house is wrong, not just you, Catherine and Hector too, everyone.
The atmosphere in the room froze with my words. But I didn't think I was wrong at all.
How dare you? To disrespect not just Louis but Hector too.
Catherine's anger was calmed by Louis saying, "It's okay."
"You said you wanted a divorce? Do you know what will happen to you and your family if you divorce?"
His cold gaze met my defiant stare.
"I'll take you up on that, let's get divorced."
"Fine, but I won't pay any alimony in a divorce trial, you know? You don't work, so you must not have any money. Are you okay with that?"
Louis smiled creepily. He thinks threatening me with money will make me return. It must have always been like this.
Even so, please divorce me.
As I answered, Louis sighed and instructed Lisa. Take the paper in the back right of that drawer. Lisa stood up, took a paper from the drawer as instructed, and handed it to him. Here. Dad said to threaten women with this when necessary. My part is already filled out. Use it as you like. The paper handed to me was a signed divorce application, just as he said. Good, I'll proceed with this immediately and cut ties with this house. If you regret it, it's not my problem. He said, to which I replied firmly. I won't regret it, I'm sure. Dragging my weakened body, I headed to the courthouse. Wait. With such a dirty look, even if you're pretending to be someone else, if a woman from the Warner family is seen walking outside at night, it'll be a shame, so use our car. I'll provide a driver for you. Hector's words made me visibly frown. Are they planning to lock me in the car and take me somewhere? Then, at that moment, the secretary, Casey, I'll do it, raised her hand to volunteer. She had been accompanying me on shopping trips ever since I got married. He then ordered Casey. Then you go. Trusting Casey, I got into the car and submitted the divorce papers. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from Louis. The first thing, he shouted. Don't mess around.
What's the matter? All of a sudden.
Don't play dumb. You're the culprit. Because of you, we're losing business partners. What are you going to do about it?
That's exactly what I wanted. I'm glad to hear that.
Irritated by my laughter.
I'll destroy your family's home,
shouted Louis. Actually, when I submitted the divorce papers. Please use this. Casey handed me a pen in the car. Inside it was footage of me being lectured by Catherine about Louis's infidelity, being forcibly taken to the car by a male secretary, and then locked in the barn. It also included the moment Louis said he wanted to live with his mistress. Casey's sister was almost forced to become Hector's mistress and was fired from the group company when she refused. Casey and her sister had different last names due to their parents' divorce, so no one realized they were sisters. She had been waiting for a chance for revenge, always carrying a pen-shaped mini-camera in her breast pocket just in case.
Your treatment by Carolina was too harsh. I like you because you're kind and always thank the secretary. This should keep your family safe. Feel free to use it as you wish. Please take it with you,
she said, entrusting me with the data. With this perfect material, I contacted a friend who worked at a publishing house to expose the reality of that house. I had planned to do this after the divorce anyway, but I was thankful to have evidence of the terrible treatment I received. I sold the data to a magazine, and the ruthless reality of the family was spread not only in magazines and newspapers but also on social media. Considering they were a family that had produced a member of parliament, even though they weren't a major corporate representative, the scandalous nature of the story attracted public attention as expected.
Basically, you exposing Dad and Mom's affair. What do you want to do?
I'm exposing all the misdeeds of your family. If there's any power left in your family, I would have been completely destroyed along with my family, right? I just took up arms to protect my family. Got a problem with that?
I had heard from Catherine's complaints every day that she actually has a lover. Initially, it started with Hector's infidelity, and as revenge, Catherine also cheated. Catherine, at 68 years old, had a lover in his 20s. She was quite smitten, apparently showering him with gifts. Catherine said,
"If it weren't for the ties to this house, we would have been married long ago."
But frankly, to the lover, Catherine was probably just a wallet. Catherine's history of affairs wasn't just with this man, apparently, there were many others in the past. While she claimed it was revenge against Hector, Catherine seemed to enjoy it just as much. It was mutual.
Because of you, Dad is even saying he'll divorce Mom. It's your fault.
I thought Warner family members weren't allowed to divorce. If your dad can't endure it anymore and easily changes his opinion, that's pretty small-minded.
Shut up. The person who caused this shouldn't be acting so high and mighty.
The cause, don't make me laugh.
It's your parents who messed up with their constant affairs, and you for cheating, leading to our divorce. What will you do if this house falls apart? I'm the only one inheriting this house and company. If it continues like this, everything. I'll lose everything. Louis's voice gradually turned to tears. It's his fault, so I wish he wouldn't cry so pathetically. Duh. If you care so much about your family and company, why not just pull yourself together and rebuild them if they collapse? Don't you have any thoughts of starting over? It's unattractive to be unable to do anything unless you're at an advantage from the start. Shut up. A commoner like you couldn't possibly understand what it feels like for me, who has been burdened with the expectations of being an heir since childhood, to have my promised future taken away. Do you really think you were the only one expected to be an heir? Of course. Well, yes, you're the only decent son. What do you mean? I'm an only child, you know that. No, you have an older half-brother with a different father. What? Don't lie. What are you talking about? After our divorce, I hired a private detective who was an acquaintance of my parents. Your family is so well known that I didn't even need a detective to find all sorts of information. An older brother for me? Don't joke. I've never heard such a thing. As he was infuriated, I patiently explained to him about the existence of his brother. But it's true. Your family's former housekeeper, Joanne, you know her, right? Hector had a child with her. He was speechless at my words. Joanne, she. He was clearly interested in the familiar name I mentioned over the phone. Well, he never acknowledged the child legally because my legal wife doesn't have children yet. Catherine, who was newly married at the time, was very against it. Catherine had you, but Hector preferred Joanne's child, whom he had first. He even told people he wanted that child to inherit the family business. Eventually, that didn't happen, and reluctantly you were born as the heir. Your family is like a drama, really. At this point, Louis whispered.
That can't be true.
In a small voice. But unlike before, his tone conveyed that he didn't think my story was false. Now, here's the question. Huh? Louis reacted with an obviously displeased voice when I suddenly started joking. Who really carries the blood of the Warner family? What do you mean? You are the child of Catherine's affair. What? When she found out about Joanne's pregnancy, she got back at Hector by getting pregnant with a man who was a driver at the time. That child was you. That's impossible. It's true, Hector didn't notice, but my investigation found people who knew about Catherine and your real father at the time. No. That's a lie. I'm the only heir to this house. Otherwise, what was all my effort for? Louis wailed like a child throwing a tantrum. That's why the real heir is Joanne's child. Not a drop of Hector's blood in you. If you doubt it, do a DNA test yourself. Well, it will be interesting to see what you, a stranger by blood, will do with that irredeemable house from now on. Good luck, bye-bye. I couldn't hide my smile as I cheerfully said goodbye to him and hung up the phone. Louis must have been shocked, he stayed silent. Then, my leak sparked other magazines to talk about Louis's family scandal. It was revealed that Louis was not of the Warner blood, Hector's tax evasion, and Catherine's verbal abuse to the driver. My plan worked faster than I thought. Louis's family fell into decline, closing all their businesses. Locally known as the no-good family, they fled the town and dispersed, now living modestly. While the relatives live modestly, Louis struggles to find a job due to his widespread exposure in magazines. He tried to command his former subordinates to find him work, but no one listens to a powerless Louis. His actions ended up in magazines, leaving him unemployed. Hector and Catherine divorced, entangled in disputes over alimony from the divorce. It was an ugly family till the end. As for me, I asked to be rehired at the department store where I worked before marriage. After that, I focused on my career, advancing smoothly. When I reached a certain age, I attended a middle school reunion and met a classmate attending for the first time in his 40s. He was not good at socializing and a man of few words. But his unpretentiousness was exactly what I found appealing and trustworthy. Thanks to that, my second marriage is going very well. The first marriage was full of struggles, but because of that, I learned to be discerning. Being single for a while allowed me to meet my current husband. In a way, my life hasn't been a waste. I even feel a little grateful to Lewis. That's how I feel now.